Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Sam.
Oh.
We go, my man.
All right.
Welcome to the podcast.
Awesome.
Hey, how do you pronounce your last name?
Can you guess? Can you give me a shot before I tell you?
VanHofwegen.
Yeah, that was it, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, where is it from? Is the next question.
VanHofwegen, that's going to be, you're going to have some German influences on that.
I guess that's true indirectly, but you're wrong. Actually, no.
The reason I said German influences
Yeah.
was not so much because of the last name, but just because I feel like that's one of the safest guesses.
Yeah, I think you're right. But German's Von,
light
so
up.
VON.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a VAN, and if you're a cultured man,
I'm
you
not.
would know that VAN means of, which is the language of this country, which is the
Okay.
Netherlands, Dutch.
Oh, okay.
So
I wasn't so far off then.
no, it's pretty good, but
Yeah, I like it. VanHofwegen.
I think
You get enough?
yeah.
All right, for those listening in on the podcast and not watching on YouTube, we're just lighting up a couple of cigars right now. So,
Go to our YouTube channel. You'll see it.
yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome to Nashville. So, when did you move here?
I moved here late May of 2020. Yeah, so about
May
like
of 2020.
May 18th or something like that, and started
Yep.
a job June 1st.
Okay,
Yeah.
congratulations. Because did you move here out of your own choice, or did Amazon move you here as part of the new Amazon outpost that's hiring 5,000 people downtown?
Right. No, yeah, it was my own choice. So I had applied for the job in Nashville. It was a Nashville job.
Okay.
Yeah, so I moved for the job.
Where were you working before that?
I was working in an MSP in Orange County, which is like a company that outsources IT support for small, medium-sized businesses. So I was doing that, and so I wasn't working at Amazon at the time.
I see.
Yeah.
So did you want to work at Amazon, and the best way to work at Amazon happened to be in Nashville, or did you want to get out of California, come to Nashville, and then you were just looking for a job locally?
Get out of California. Yeah, so I was looking at a job, and Amazon's probably one of the big guys that is super down with hiring people out of state.
Yeah.
Like if they have out of state applicants, they don't even look twice at it.
Really?
Yeah, they do it all the time. That's why they moved to cities like Austin and Nashville.
Okay.
Because they can recruit people from all over the world, and they don't move to Detroit so they can convince like really high dollar, high skilled employees that you can't find anywhere else to come to a city that everyone wants to go to, like Nashville,
Yes.
like Austin. So it makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting point. So Amazon's not going to put a new office building in, say, Detroit, Michigan, and plan to hire 5,000 people there with hopes of them just, wanting to work at Amazon so bad they're willing to live in Detroit.
Yeah.
They're picking cool cities or growing cities or cities in areas that they know that the people that they want to work there are going to be happy living in those cities.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and because some of like the upper echelon of like the technical talent, they're trying to recruit from other big tech giants, and these guys that have experience that you can't get anywhere else. So
Yes.
these guys, they're trying to recruit and get them to move, and that's really hard. So they're working on these people for like multiple years.
I
so they
see.
can get them to come to Nashville easier if they're coming from Seattle or whatever.
Okay.
Or California.
Just sort of like metaphorically whining and dining these people, like checking in every so often,
Yep.
like you still enjoying where you're working, keep us in mind, like that type
Yeah,
of thing.
exactly.
What does
I
that
remember-
look like to kind of work on someone over a period of few
Yeah,
years?
I wonder. I remember I was watching a video. It was like this. It wasn't super famous, but it was talking about like recruiting at Amazon. They have all in-house recruiting.
Okay.
And so he was talking about that, like this talent that you can't find. It's not something you can go to school for, but it's in like the upper echelon, like senior software developer, innovation engineers, these kinds of guys that are just like crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So
Do you want it? By the way, do you want any bourbon to go with the cigar?
sure.
I mean, I kind of feel like
I'd love that. It's a
if
good.
we're going to be sucking on a cigar, we need a little bit of guidance to go along with
Definitely.
that. This is a local Nashville company.
Okay.
Here, Guidance Whiskey, Jason Rigel. What episode number was that, Andrew, that he was on?
Want to say 55.
Thank you.
All right, we got plenty here.
Yeah.
So you are here in Nashville, Tennessee, and because you got the job with Amazon, what was the hiring process like?
Oh, it was crazy. So it was all remote. Obviously, I think it was easier probably to do it that way. There was a screening, a phone screening, and then if you passed the phone screening, it was more of a technical thing. Then you went to this this final day, and the final day was 4 interviews, 4 different people, like an hour each.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and those, I think before the COVID, I would have had to fly to Nashville to do it.
Okay, for those 4
Yeah.
1 hour each final interviews.
Yep.
But because of COVID, even that was virtual?
Yep.
Just
Yep.
do it
I
on
did it
Zoom?
all in my room. And
Okay.
yeah, but it was crazy because you're talking to, there's like escalation points. So like one of the interviewers is like this really high up guy, that's talking to you. So it's really interesting. And then they have these leadership principles that are kind of like the 10 Commandments. That's super important. Everything's based on it. So I was just studying the leadership principles, for hours trying to, yeah. Cause I know what they want here and all that kind of stuff.
Okay,
So
yeah.
now I haven't looked at them in a long time, but I hope they don't listen to that. But yeah,
Well, but also now
yeah.
that you have the job, you're living it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
it's not like
exactly.
these principles come up every single day.
Right.
Or even every week, but you're
Right.
still there and now you're part of the culture and everything. And so
Yep.
it's just more natural now at this point, where in the past you had to study it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting.
So did you have someone refer you, or did you just find a job posting on LinkedIn or something and you literally just submitted your resume?
Yeah,
What's the very first step?
Yeah, I found a job posting. So it was I just applied for it. I think it was the first job I applied for, and I wasn't really ready to move yet. So I just kind of did it like as a joke. It was like, and then I after that applied for like 100 jobs. And then the first one that I applied for, probably the best one I applied for, they contacted me. So
You applied for 100 jobs at Amazon.
no, other jobs in Nashville. Like,
Oh, wow.
like going recruiters. Once I got ready, like I'm gonna want to move. I'm gonna.
Okay.
Yeah, I was looking for other things. So that was the first job I applied for, is Amazon. Yeah.
Wow. So you applied for 100 give or take jobs in your particular area of expertise.
Yeah.
And Amazon was either your best choice or the only one you could get, or however that worked out. But you were happy
Yeah.
with the Amazon job.
Yeah, I mean yeah, definitely. I mean, now that seeing like all the benefits that you got and everything is really awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting was I know, so there's a sign-on bonus, but if I were to put my California address for tax information, which I could have done because it was all remote, I think it would have been 60% taxed for sign-on bonus. And so what I did was I put my Airbnb address in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, and it was 20%. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
So that's
the
how different it was.
withholding,
Yeah.
the withholding on the employer's side of just the sign-on bonus
Yeah.
in California was going to be 60%. They would withhold for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's
in Tennessee, it was 20%.
20%. Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, I know
Dang,
bonuses are
that
always
is
taxed more.
Crazy.
Right.
Right.
So, and I knew that was true, but yeah.
Well, they're taxed more, I think, because they always annualize your income, right? So if you're going to get a bonus, let's call it $5,000 or $1,000, whatever it was, they're going to take that bonus that you're getting and annualize that out and project that as if that's going to be your annual income, and they have to tax it at that rate.
Right.
I think that's why the bonuses are taxed higher. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it's going to be like that for the second year bonus because I'm getting it monthly, but this was a one sum. So it was taxed individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in any case, it was a 60%
Yeah.
comparison to
Yep.
Tennessee's 20% comparison.
Yeah.
That's
So,
fascinating.
and I could have put that address because I was working remotely. I could have totally put that address. So it's really
That is interesting.
crazy, right?
So what, by the way, can you tell us a little bit about then what is your work? It's probably going to be over my head, but let's just take a
it's not
step.
super technical. So it's I'm an IT support engineer. So I'm working on the ops tech first responders team. So it's pretty much like a tech support thing, but I'm working with in-house Amazon employees. And then I'm also on the team that supports Amazon lockers, which are all those automated lockers that are in like apartment buildings, like in metro areas that people can deliver packages to.
Also, the ones you see outside of,
Yep.
I've seen them outside of Whole Foods, maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
Walmart's, no, probably no way.
Now
no way
Walmart's
it'd be
like
Walmart,
it'll
but-
be like 7-Elevens and stuff like that. They're out there,
Yeah.
and then most of them are apartment lockers. So
I see.
they're managed by the property managers there. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so can you help us to understand? Because I've heard multiple people have this question for a tiny example that we have here in Nashville, which is Dave Ramsey's company. He has a radio show, and then he got into events, and now he has different, product lines. And I think he's employing, it's around 800 people, give or take. But he recently built a new office building. He has a lot of people there, and when you drive by during the day, at least pre-COVID, there's just cars everywhere. And like the comment is like, man, how does it take that many people? To work at a place where it's mostly air and website. So now you look at Amazon, and that question just gets like extrapolated, to the biggest degree possible almost, which is, How many employees does Amazon have? Because it's a ton. And why does it take so many employees like to have a web-based business, go round?
Right. I think Amazon employees are about around 800,000 right now, worldwide.
800,000.
Yeah, that's not, and correct me if I'm wrong there, but it's not the contractors. So there's a lot of Amazon contractors and indirect employees. And so if you add those, I think it's like 1.2 or something like that.
Dang.
So,
okay, why does it take 800,000 people to make a web-based business go around?
Right. So Amazon is more than just the e-commerce is one of the things you should say. So one of the biggest chunk of Amazon now is the AWS space. So Amazon Web Services, public cloud infrastructure. So that's a big part of the company. So things like Netflix is all of Netflix's data. It's all hosted on Amazon servers. The whole
AWS.
thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So Netflix is paying a monthly fee to Amazon, every month to rent their servers.
Yes.
All over the world. So that's really where they're big. Even if their e-commerce flopped somehow and was overtaken, they would be fine, right? Because they have the biggest part of the market share of public cloud, which is the most important thing for like the future of the internet and tech and everything.
Yep.
So that's a big part of it. And then I think all the little stuff that Amazon has, like just Amazon lockers. So it's like this little thing. Some person had the idea a long time ago. It worked. They implemented it. And again, it's all free of charge. No customers paying to use these lockers. It's all just a free service. So the amount of people that I know personally just servicing the lockers, right? All the teams, there's like at least like 200, 300, 400 people just doing that stuff. Developers, the support side, like me, like they call us to fix them. The field techs, we have like I don't know how much I should say, but we have like, I think it's Redbox helps us service the lockers, the field techs.
Okay.
So all that stuff, like every little idea Amazon has, which is a ton, right? I mean, all these little Amazon Fresh, all these Amazon blank, we all know them.
Yes.
We've tried to look at them for a second or whatever. Those all have giant teams.
Sure.
And so it's really amazing. And I wonder if they even think about that when they have these ideas, like, oh, this would be really cool. And the amount of personnel it would take to just keep that going is unbelievable.
Yeah. What do you have there, Andrew?
The latest, I Googled how many Amazon employees there are. This is according to Business Insider, showing their explosive growth as the tech giant prepares to add 133,000 workers amid record online sales. This article is from July 2020, so right in the middle of the pandemic. And this little paragraph right here says, these positions, in addition to the 876,000 permanent employees that Amazon employed as of July, could push Amazon's global headcount, including permanent and temporary, up to roughly 1.2 million workers.
Dang.
There you go. Yeah.
That's so many. Can you imagine being the boss for 876,000 people?
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's so many.
Amazing.
I mean, how many? I wonder how many direct reports Bezos has.
I think it might say, actually.
Yeah, I might know. I knew that for sure. I can just look it up and see how much he has.
Direct reports. Like, do you think it's like a couple dozen, do you think?
Yeah, it's not more than that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's something like that. Yeah.
Jeff Bezos did confirm that the company directly employs 1 million.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But like people reporting to him, I think it's like a dozen.
Like direct reports. Yeah. Andrew, can you pull up, because we don't want to get Sam in trouble with insider information. Can you pull up if you pull up like the biggest revenue streams of Amazon? I'm curious because AWS is one of those it's one of those revenue streams that we don't always think of with Amazon.
It's so
you know what I
big.
mean? But it's so big, and we often think of I do because I use the Amazon app way too often. It's like, well, that's Amazon. You know what I mean? But Amazon is so much more than that.
I remember I've read like reputable articles like on Forbes, and they're saying like the new Walmart like Prime version is going to overtake, and Etsy's going to overtake Amazon, and they're not even talking about AWS. It's like, like what you're not even going to mention that in the article. It's so important.
Yeah, it really is.
Did you ever see? Crazy.
Did you ever see the TV show Silicon Valley?
No, but I know the concept. Yeah,
okay, you know the concept. I mean, there's some scenes in there where they're in like these server farms.
Yeah.
And they're getting lost down there, like, and that's AWS, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Because all these things, like Netflix is stored, air quotes, in the cloud, right? And that's the thing.
Yeah.
But still, everything that's in the cloud is on a physical server somewhere.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, right. We got to the point where internet is fast. The global network is fast enough to where compute resources can be hosted somewhere else in the middle of Virginia, and then it can do the computing power that you desire, right? All the physical hardware, like RAM and CPU and all that stuff, and then it can transmit that over the network to you, and it's fast enough to where that will work. So that's where we're at now, and it's going to get to the point where we won't need any computer hardware at all. Like the computers on the desk, that won't be a thing. You'll just have a network device, and all the computing power, everything will be a subscription, which is gonna suck for us. Because
why? For Amazon?
Well, I think like companies like Apple, right?
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a new Apple computer. It's going to be a new Apple like device, and then you're going to subscribe to compute resources that are hosted somewhere else.
So you think that's where it's going?
Yeah, but the only thing that's holding it back is the speed. So once we get
the speed, or isn't?
It is for that something that drastic. Like you're doing video editing, and all the compute resources are being funneled over the network.
Deal.
Yeah, this is just like hosting websites and like streaming video and all that kind of stuff. That's possible. Even video games, they're getting to that point too, where you can stream the computing power over the network, right?
Okay. So here what do you have here, Andrew? Is this where it breaks down? Do you have a graph there?
Investopedia.
Okay.
Some key takeaways is that Amazon makes most of its money through its retail, subscriptions, and web services, similar to what Sam was saying.
Subscription and AWS, sure, yeah.
Retail remains their primary source of revenue, with online and physical stores accounting for the biggest share. Their North American segment was the fastest growing out of all of its segments for the second quarter 2020.
Can you scroll up to there was a chart there I thought I saw?
Right here.
Okay, but that's North America, International, and AWS. Oh, dang, look at that. So North America, revenue from North America, Amazon 62%, international revenue 26%, and AWS is 12%. But then look at operating income. Oh, crap, look at that.
Yeah, 58%.
Of their operating income, though, AWS accounts for 58%.
Yeah.
So essentially, you could look at that as like net profits, net operating profits maybe. Because I think when it's saying income there, it's talking about profits, not gross revenue. Look how profitable AWS is. 58% of Amazon's operating income is AWS.
Right.
36% is from everything in North America, and only 6% is international. So the North America operations are more profitable than international operations, and AWS income is way more profitable than anything they have going on. That is.
And then the market, when you look at the market share of public cloud, so the other two big ones are Google's public cloud, what do they call it? I think it's GCP. And then there's Azure, Microsoft Azure. And so these are the public cloud infrastructures, which are one of the most expensive things to do in the world right now. And then they don't even have a slip. The amount, it's like 80% market share of public cloud is Amazon. So they aren't even close.
80% of the public market share is Amazon.
Yeah,
for cloud-based services.
Of cloud-based services. So like a majority of websites nowadays are probably hosted on Amazon servers. Yeah.
That is like total domination.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Do we expect Amazon? So I know Google is getting beat up right now by who's beating them up in government. Who's over these things? It's basically like antitrust.
Yeah,
saying they're a monopoly or
FCC?
Whatever. It's not that. It's.
I just heard it today. Yeah, they're doing a hearing tomorrow about that.
Yeah, that's like a senator hearing or something like that, right? Whatever it is, like the Senate Oversight Committee. Yeah,
one of the committees.
That.
Yeah.
So is Amazon? Do we know that if Amazon's getting beat up? Because it didn't mention it in the article I read. It was just referring to Google.
Yeah, I think they're doing. Amazon's doing a lot of censoring on their streaming platforms too, because obviously they don't run like a search engine. So Google's always brought up because the search results and things like that, and then Facebook's brought up because of the social media. So like all the interactions is happening. So Amazon's platforms are not like that so much.
Mm-hmm.
But
so just on Amazon there, I was going to ask you one more thing about that. Are you working out of the headquarters that they're going to build downtown? Because that's not built yet, right?
No, I think it's like halfway done or something like that.
Will you work out of there?
I will, yeah.
Okay.
They just pushed it back to June of working remotely. So I have not ever been there.
So you're working from your house
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
I see. All right. Fascinating. Now, why did you want to move to Nashville to begin with? Because you mentioned that you wanted to move to Nashville and
Yeah.
then you started looking for jobs in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So why Nashville?
Well, okay, yeah. So I think I fell in love with the region. I think of the Southeast and the South in general. That was a big part of it too. And I mean, so I guess the low cost of living, the low taxes, the political climate, and then like kind of the historical part of it, and then the natural beauty. I think
Weather, was that a big factor or not so much?
Yeah. So California has the best weather in the world.
Yeah.
Mediterranean weather, desert coastal weather. You can't get better than that. You pay for it.
Yeah.
But it's also the flip side of it is it's boring, right?
Okay.
Everything's
It's like one season?
yeah, one season. All the trees are fake in the sense that they were planted there and they're taken care of, and they wouldn't be there if you didn't take care of them in that sense.
Oh, interesting.
Here, trees are naturally they grow and they're there. No one put them there. They're just there, you know.
Yep.
So that was cool. Everything's fake, and to have your weather have a little more character is a cool thing.
Yep.
Now I might get sick of it, like people say, but yeah.
I will say the winters in Tennessee or in Nashville, they can get a little on the long side,
Yeah.
but it's what you compare it to. You
Right.
know, like we came from upstate New York and we had winter 9 months out of the year out there, 8 months. You know what I mean?
Right,
and
right.
it's like 2 foot of snow, 1 foot
Yeah.
of snow. That's nothing that uncommon. 15 degrees, -5 degrees. You know, that happened. So it depends what you compare it to. Here, it's a lot of like 35, 40 degree weather, rainy, like today. Like today feels like it could honestly be a day in January. And so so it's not awesome, but you do get 4 seasons.
Right.
And you know, I like the weather here. It has character.
Yep.
And you
Yeah.
said Orange County.
Orange County.
So
yeah.
like give me some cities. What were you close to?
So Orange County's 10 counties. I was in Huntington Beach, which is one of the beach cities. It's right below Newport and next to Seal Beach, Newport, Laguna Beach, all those beach cities in Orange County. And so yeah, I was about 10 minutes from the beach.
Okay. And
Yeah.
how where is that between San Francisco and LA? Is it,
Oh,
or is it
yeah,
south
so-
of LA?
It's south of LA. So
Yeah, okay.
you have LA City, LA County, and then right below it's like an Orange County, which is basically a suburb of LA.
So you're between LA and San Diego.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Now San Diego, that is nice. It's
Nice,
city.
yeah. And
it's really nice.
What people know about Orange County is that's where Disneyland is. So Anaheim is Orange County.
Okay.
So that's probably the easiest way to look at it. If you're going to go to Disneyland, it would be Orange County.
So did you have any family here, or have you visited Nashville before?
Nope. No, not even. I had no family. I knew no one. I had never visited. And
You didn't visit before you moved?
I visited last year alone, but I went to East Tennessee. I flew into Atlanta and drove in a big circle and visited like all these small cities, but I never went to Nashville.
Wow.
But, yeah.
You moved here without visiting.
Yeah.
Welcome, man.
Yeah.
Welcome home.
Yeah,
I
it's
hope you
awesome.
like it here.
I do. Yeah, it's been great. Everyone's been so nice.
Good.
And, I really feel that hospitality, that Southern hospitality.
That's a real thing.
I think it is, yeah.
It is.
It is.
How did you find? Do you come to Emmanuel, Nashville?
Yeah.
That's how you met Andrew.
Yep.
How did you find Emmanuel?
So I was looking for a church. I think probably the Acts 24 network online is where
Acts 29?
Acts 29. Sorry,
Yeah.
Acts 29.
There's
Is
a
probably
lighter if you need
where I
it.
found. Oh yeah, thanks. And that's where I saw it. And then I was just looking at some of the preaching. I think who sold me on it was Sam Alberry.
Oh yeah.
I think I was watching him. I didn't know who the pastor was or anything like that or any
Okay.
history. So I think I just watched a little bit of Sam Alberry.
Did you
and I
know
fell in love.
Sam? Did you know who he was before you?
No,
saw?
I didn't. I
Oh,
found
yeah?
out later that he was, at RZIM and
Yeah.
the Gospel Coalition, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But just the way he was orating the gospel was exactly what I needed. So
Yes.
It
Yeah,
was-
that's
it was
cool.
beautiful.
That's cool to hear. So we lost Sam with visa issues.
Yeah.
but we're getting him back soon. Hopefully.
yeah, I can't wait. I've never met him, but I miss him already. So
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's very cool to hear. I'm sure Sam
Yeah.
would love to hear
yeah,
that. Sam is, dude. He's the real deal, man. He is. I have so much respect for Sam,
yeah.
and he is a master communicator. He's a good author too. I haven't read a ton of his books, but
Yeah.
very good communicator.
7
Yeah.
Myths About Singleness is the one I read by him, and
Mm.
one of the most insightful books I've probably ever read.
Yeah.
And I read a lot.
Well, he is also very experienced with standing up for the truth when it's not popular to do so.
Yeah.
He was with the Anglican Church in England.
Oh, right.
And Andrew, you might know a little bit more about this than I, but my understanding was the kind of Anglican Church as a denomination over there sort of went pro-gay.
Yeah.
And Sam didn't think that was, what the Bible was saying.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Sam, though, is he's public with his same-sex attraction.
Right.
But he does, he thinks that marriage is for man and woman.
Sure.
And so that's something that he deals with, but he's not going to act on it or anything like that. And he's open about it.
Sure.
I just find that that's kind of rare, in like Christian circles for people to be open with that. That's usually that's something that you want to keep a secret. I really respect Sam for being open with that and writing books on it.
Oh yeah.
And then, so anyhow, dealing with just that being the stance and him not being, keeping that stuff private, him being public with all of those things. And then preaching on those subjects and writing books about it. And then, how he kind of dealt with the Anglican Church over there. I mean, this guy is he's got a backbone of steel.
Yeah.
I mean, he really does, but he deals with, is that Sam right there?
Yeah. I thought I was hearing him in my head.
Yeah.
How it happens often.
But it's not like the guy has just a magical backbone of steel. He has anxieties and fears like all of us. He's a person, you know what I mean? But, he refuses to move off the message of the gospel and the truth of Scripture.
Yeah.
What do you have there, Andrew?
This is a YouTube video of Sam Mulberry. It was the first time I was ever introduced to him. I didn't realize who he was at the time. I just more or less saw this video on my Facebook feed. It was when he was testifying before a British court about the message of Jesus on marriage is how it's life-giving and actually life-affirming in the biblical definition of marriage.
If people want to look it up, just search for Sam Mulberry explains how the message of Jesus on marriage is life-giving.
Correct.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's very... No, that probably won't play well without it being hooked into the audio. We'll get there.
We're getting some toys soon.
Yeah. So that's cool that you saw Sam, and now you're here.
Yeah, so...
California. Let's talk about California.
Yeah.
And states' laws.
Sure.
Kind of big picture. What I was looking up some stuff before you got here, and there was one video that was 13 minutes on YouTube that I hadn't seen yet, but it has over 2 million views. What's it called, Andrew?
Fleeing California.
Fleeing California, and it was put out by
Prager. Is that
Prager, which I think is a conservative.
It is. Yeah. It's Dennis Prager. Yeah.
But anyhow, the video was interesting. So I'm assuming, the video is made in such a way to reinforce their viewpoints or
absolutely,
the direction they want people to go or whatever, their philosophies and political views and stuff.
Right.
However, at least so far what I was seeing in the video, it was mostly fact-based, and it was pretty fascinating. What I find interesting right now is, don't you think that right now we have playing out in America sort of a real-life, in-our-face case study of kind of a more liberal / socialist kind of political viewpoint as compared to a more capitalist / conservative, and which one is going to, where's it working? You know what I mean? Can't we look at states right now and see, all right, well, that's your political viewpoint, that's your philosophy, and how's that working for you?
Right.
And then, and you can look, I think the two best states to compare is California and Texas. I mean, those are the states that are commonly compared.
Right.
And with California, you have a very liberal, Democrat sort of more left-wing. I guess in some way a little bit more socialist. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they have a supermajority in the state legislature. So it's a great experiment to see.
And then you can compare that to a state like Tennessee, or maybe even a better example is Texas, and we can kind of see, what's working and what's not, I guess.
Right.
And I mean, there's always things that it's not a complete apples to apples comparison because, for example, California is their biggest export is entertainment, right? I mean, that's the big one.
Yeah, so I think and information, IP, intellectual property is probably a better way to say it. So it'd be entertainment in the Silicon Valley, so all that kind of stuff too.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So what are your thoughts on what's working, what's not, as you look at the different states and their political viewpoints and so forth? What are you seeing in America right now?
Well, I think the question you'd ask is, where are people moving to? Right. So where are people flocking towards? So that kind of tells you a lot. And obviously people are flocking towards those low tax, high growth areas, which right now is a lot of the Bible Belt, the South, and then some of the Midwest, and then going that way. So, and they're fleeing the coastal cities, and it's interesting because that's a unique thing to America right now. People like millennials are leaving big metropolises like LA and Chicago and New York, and they're moving towards smaller cities like Nashville and Austin or whatever. And that's not true in the rest of the world. Big metropolises like Beijing are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Middle Eastern cities like in Turkey, those are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But in America, they're actually going to different smaller cities. Pretty cool.
Why is that?
I don't know. I guess Americans are a little different. I guess sometimes we. That's interesting. I'm not sure. People want. I think the idea of like that small town life, a simpler life, that kind of thing, where you know people around you, is revered and I guess idolized in America.
Do you think it's also because when you look at internationally, like you mentioned, Beijing is a good example where those big cities are still growing?
Yeah.
Do you think it's that if you look at your other options of where to live there, you're not going to have a difference in laws or regulations or maybe even lifestyle? Probably lifestyle, because if you live in the country, that would be a very different lifestyle. But you don't have the differences in taxation and regulation.
Sure, like the federal system, like different states that have different governments.
Exactly, right? They wouldn't really have that internationally so much, would they? That's one thing that's unique to America is you can live in different states and have a very different experience of the government in terms of taxes and regulations and stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Whereas internationally, I mean, I'm just thinking there's places I like being around cities. If it's like I think Nashville is a great mix. I also like visiting New York. I don't know if I would want to live in New York right now. But
right. California is a great place to visit too. I tell people that all the time. California is awesome. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful states in the union. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the different climates. It's got the tallest trees in the world, the oldest trees in the world, and the widest trees in the world. Isn't that amazing? So there's a lot of cool history in California. It's beautiful. Obviously, Yosemite and things like that. The beach, the coastlines, great places to live. But that's why one of the sad things about it's kind of turning into like the makeup of a third world country. It's obviously not that, but the idea of like no middle class and that kind of stuff.
Well, what's turning it into that?
Well, so I think it's the politics, of course. The difference between North Korea and South Korea, it's just politics. The people are the same, so it makes sense. Politics does matter. I know the trend of people moving out of California are middle, low income, uneducated class, and the trend of people moving into California are high earners, people like elite workers. So that's what's been happening the last 10 years, and so that's eroding the middle class too. But yeah, it's the high taxes. It's things like that. Yeah, it's definitely politics. Regulation,
part of it too. I know there was a lot of people that were tired of being locked down. Apparently,
yeah.
Well, when did you move here again?
Yeah, so 5 months ago. So I was
out at the beginning of COVID.
I was out at the beginning, but the funny part, or the interesting part that I want to see maybe in like 5 months from now, is the data of how the COVID pandemic exacerbated people moving out of California or people from other states too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about you saying like high earners, upper class people moving into California, that seems to go against logic, doesn't it? Like, why wouldn't they move to lower tax states?
Yeah. I wonder. I think it's because of majority of the jobs in California are those high income jobs. I think the high earners that are moving out of California are the business owners. Like corporations are moving out, but like the earners themselves. I know there's cities. There's a city in Orange County that it's filled with just like South Koreans, Chinese, super like educated, super high income people, and there's no like normal kind of middle class like whites there at all. Like Irvine is mostly Koreans, and they're like people that are extremely successful, and so it's an interesting phenomenon that you'd see that in that way.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So are they living there because they figured out how to get around the tax code in California, and they figured out how to live there and still not be taxed either at their business level or personal level? Somehow they're getting around the taxes, like having either
Yeah, right.
Like their company's either international or it's in another headquartered in another state, but they happen to live here. Is that what they're doing? Or they're so wealthy and making such a great income that they don't care to pay the higher taxes in California?
Yeah, I wonder. It's probably both. I know majority, like California hasn't lost, it's only the net loss of immigration like last 10 years. It was only like 90,000. So like, it's not like, even though there's been a ridiculous amount of people leaving, there's also been a lot of people moving in, but most of those people are out of country migrants. So
that are moving in.
Yeah. And a lot of those aren't high earners. So, but they're moving in because there's so many established enclaves where people can go and they, places like Little Saigon in Orange County, like, so, and they don't have to, it's these migrant enclaves that are easier for you to make the move. So it makes sense, even though California is a terrible place in terms of like economics to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's an easy place to migrate into.
Yeah. For a lot of for the immigrant communities.
I see.
Yeah.
To your point, I saw a stat before you got here. It was like 2017 or 2018, 700,000 people had moved out of California, but 500,000 people had moved in.
Yeah,
so that year it was a net loss of 200,000.
Yeah, so people are still moving there, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. This stat is hard to believe, and I think it kind of speaks to the politics a little bit. So,
right,
on an annual basis, California spends more in it's what was it, Andrew? It's in the Evernote there. California, it's not Medicare.
Medicaid. Yeah, that's California. It's California's Medicare.
Welfare.
Yeah.
California spends more annually on welfare than Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Hawaii combined.
Yeah.
And that includes Texas.
So much.
The big state, Texas.
Yeah.
I wonder what the population comparison is between California and all those other states.
It's a lot. I mean, California's 40 million.
40 million.
Yeah, I believe.
Of America's 335 million.
Yeah, so
California is about 15% of our entire country.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at a stat like that, is it possible that the population of California is equal to all those states I just listed off as well? And if that's the case, well, then of course they're going to spend, you know what I mean, about that much.
Right, yeah.
So
definitely.
That might be one of those areas where the statistic it's accurate, but it also it helps the cause of that video.
Sure,
you know
sure.
What I mean?
Right, yeah. I think another interesting thing about the whole interstate migration that's happening is people are moving for political reasons, like the political climate. Not even like what politics are doing, but like just there's a great study. I think it was done in the end of 2019. It was Berkeley, UC Berkeley, into IGS, the Intergovernmental Studies, and they had on that survey like that signifier, like, oh, are you moving for political climate? And they were baffled about how high it was. And so I think they said out of all California voters, not just people, but just the voters, 50% have considered or somewhat seriously considered or somewhat considered moving out of California. 50% of the voters.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the question that comes up is who's moving out of California, right? Are people Californiaing Texas, right? Don't California my Texas.
Yes.
Or, is it turning that way? And so that's an interesting phenomenon because I've seen great arguments for either side. That majority of people moving out of California are actually more conservative Republican voters moving for political climates. But I think in that study, they had seen that out of, I think it was like 50% or 60% of very conservative voters wanted to move out of California. I think very liberal voters was like at like 20%.
Okay.
So it seems like the trend is majority. And then also there was an exit poll in 2018 with the Senate race in California, Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. The exit poll showed out-of-state people that have moved that year. So it wasn't just California, but out-of-state, they were 15% favoring Ted Cruz. So out-of-state voters were actually 50% up on Ted Cruz, which is really kind of goes against the narrative like Texas is moving blue and that kind of thing. So it's very interesting.
you're saying that of the people that came into Texas, that moved into Texas,
Yeah, from other states.
from other states, the majority of those people that moved into Texas were favoring Ted Cruz, a Republican,
Yeah.
over his Democratic opponent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So then that would speak to there being not maybe a huge pressing threat on Texas becoming the next California,
Yeah. People.
right?
Yeah.
But there's
it's
still that
interesting.
possibility.
There is.
has
Yeah.
to be.
People have said is Texas is obviously becoming bluer. If you look at like the rate at like George W. Bush won it, and then like looking at like Romney and McCain, and as it goes, it's lesser. They're winning by lesser points.
Texas.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but I think a lot of it's drummed up by political parties because if you say that, it energizes the base. So they were saying, so that's a thing too, where it's not really, it's politically expedient to say, oh, it's turning blue. Like you need to try harder and we'll get it to go that way. So I think, I think they were talking about like the TV ads that the Biden campaign was purchasing in Texas. And then, it was like this big deal, like it was millions of dollars. So he thinks he can win it. And then like right after they canceled the ads, which there's no penalty to cancel ads. So that happens a lot of times where they'll get a bunch of reservations and then just cancel right after on both sides. It's like a dinner reservation though. You don't get penalized for it. So,
but you can cause a certain reaction.
Yeah.
Maybe even a chain reaction by announcing that you've bought all these TV ads in a particular state.
Sure.
Maybe run a couple of them, cancel the rest.
Yeah.
You never intended to spend those millions.
Exactly. Because like in California, right? Everyone knew, all like the conservative voters, we always made the jokes and complained how our votes didn't matter, right? Electoral college, it's never going to matter. My dad's like, oh, I'm so proud of you. Your vote's going to matter now in Tennessee or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's really funny. Like he's jealous of that. So,
yeah.
but if someone were to come into California and say, wow, California's really close to going red this year. And so then all those voters would be energized and be like, oh my gosh, I need to vote now.
Right.
Because my vote actually might matter. So that happens. It's a political weapon.
Do you know how many points Trump is up in Texas right now? I think I heard him say at a rally in Pennsylvania a few days ago that it was only 4 points, which sounded really
something like that.
low.
Yeah. Yeah.
You think it's actually that low?
Oh man.
I mean, because isn't that concerning? If in the great state of Texas, a conservative,
right. No,
runner candidate is only up 4 points. That was surprising to me.
Yeah, Texas is definitely going bluer, but I don't know if it is because of like Californians. It might be some of it is from like immigrants from Mexico, all in like the border counties. That's a big part of it too.
Sure.
Over the years, you can see like the county electoral map is that way, where like a lot of counties on the border are blue. So that's a big part of it too. But yeah, man, I don't know.
Why didn't you move to Austin?
Yeah, that's where my team is. The other half of my team is in Austin.
Is it really?
Yeah. I think I saw that. One of the reasons why I wanted to go to Tennessee is it's one of those states that has become redder over the years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you look at like certain counties and going through the presidential elections and the midterm elections, it's become redder. Tennessee has become redder. It's one of those states that have, and there is states that have become redder. But that's the thing is that it doesn't help the Republicans' electoral map if the red states become redder.
That's right.
They need to make blue states become red or whatever, purple or whatever.
Yes.
So it's not going to help them. But if you want to go to a place and you like low taxes it's a good place to go, I guess. But
so that's interesting. So you're in California, and can you pull that map off there, Andrew? Unless you wanted to point something out on it. There's a lot of movement on it. Is that, by the way, that's like a moving map of people moving out of California?
It's a visual graph on Reddit in the subreddit called Data is Beautiful. Someone made a GIF version of this map of where Californians are moving over the last 7 years.
yeah,
Look how many of them are going to the East Coast, though. That's shocking to me.
yeah.
I mean, look
the
at
colors. The colors are changing with the years. So you'll notice at the top it says California migration patterns in 2015, 16, 12, and it sort of recycles.
the hot spots. There's a good amount of, and for those that soon we're going to have screen in picture, right, or whatever, where people watching on YouTube can see this screen. Right now they can't. But what stands out to me is that there's a little chunk of these people fleeing California that go to Denver. There's a whole bunch going to Florida. And there's a whole bunch going to the Northeast. That surprises me.
Yeah.
mean, there's so many going to the Northeast. I would have thought, well, look how many are also going up to Washington.
It's only telling us that they're going everywhere.
That's true.
It looks, yeah. I mean, baby. I think 70 million baby boomers were born in California. 70 million, and right now the population is 40 million. So at that time, 70 million were born in California, and that was like the gold rush of the 1950s, where the 1850s there's gold rush for real gold. 1950s the economies were skyrocketing. All my families from Iowa to South Dakota, majority of the families in Southern California are Midwestern, and we don't go back more than 2 generations. Right, so there was a mass migration to California in the 1950s. After World War II, a lot of servicemen went through California, going to fight in the Pacific, saw how wonderful it was and the weather, and they migrated there. That's my grandpa was in World War II, and he migrated from California. Yeah,
but he was from the Midwest.
Yep, South Dakota.
He went through South Dakota. He went through California.
Yeah,
fell in love with the geography, and moved there. So back then in the 50s and 60s, was the political difference not so great as it is now?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
because it sounds like if your family or your dad, saw California now, he would love it and maybe go vacation there, but he wouldn't move there.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think almost every like the circles that I'm in, like the conservative evangelical circles, is most of what I was playing around in. And those almost everybody had expressed to me that they want to move out. So. But yeah, it has changed. I mean, Reagan won California, Nixon won California in the 80s. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and they were from California, so there's that dynamic of like an in-state voting for a Californian kind of thing. But, I mean, it happened. It wasn't very long ago. Mm-hmm. So.
Was there anything else that you liked better about Nashville than Austin, aside from the fact that it looked like Tennessee would stay red with more certainty and longer maybe than Texas? I mean, weather, or it sounds like you didn't have family in either city, right?
Yeah.
Job opportunities were the same in either city?
I think so. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I think what it was I wanted to be close to the Appalachian Mountains. I had fallen in love.
Oh, okay.
And then I loved the Civil War. So Tennessee is the major battleground for the Western War in the Civil War. So that was appealing to me, to be kind of around those areas and not be like in Virginia. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So part of
which is not popular.
History is part of the reason you're here.
That's not true. I mean, probably 10 out of 10 people or whatever that you ask, it wouldn't be the case. But for me, it was something else I had fallen in love with, was that kind of history, and not being a part of it at all. I have no ties to the Civil War, only in faith of being an American. But, my family came through Ellis Island in the early 20th century, like a lot of the people on the West Coast. So, yeah.
I want to hear a little bit more about your family. Mm-hmm. Do you have siblings?
I do, yeah. One older brother and a younger sister.
Where are they?
So they're in California still.
Okay.
And my parents are there as well. And I was living, I'm 26 years old. I was living with my parents.
Okay.
I had a good job, but I could have moved out, but it would have been heinous. Couldn't have saved any money. And majority of people in California do not save money, paycheck to paycheck. I was talking to like the CFO of my company, and he has a family. He's making tons of money, and he told me he was living paycheck to paycheck. And I was like, at the Christmas party last December, I'm like, okay, I got to get out of here. And he's from Florida, I think, and he was talking about. But it's like, if he's living paycheck to paycheck, and I think his wife was staying home, but being a single income household was a joke. It's not going to happen.
I mean, the question is, like, at what point do people stop accepting the fact that the government's going to take 50%, 60%, 70% of their income, right? But isn't this one of those things where if we all just kind of flew in from outer space and we kind of scattered equally across states, and some states are going to take, you add up all the taxes, income and I mean, all of them, payroll, taxes. And I mean, there's so many taxes when you break them out. It's ridiculous how long that list is of taxes. But in some states, you're going to go to work and you're going to work hard, and that state's going to take, you're going to have about 20% of everything you earn taken. In other states, 60%. In other states, 40%. And over here, it's 45%. And over here, it's 65%. Like, quickly, we'd all be like, yeah, I love it here, but man, that's 65% compared to 20%. Boom, I'm moving.
Yeah.
But there's this, it's like the concept isn't of like putting a frog in a kettle of cool water and he's comfortable and you turn the heat on and
Sure.
doesn't feel it until he's dead.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how taxes is a lot of
Yeah,
times
absolutely.
too, because we don't really just wake up one day and like, no. I'm not going to go to work and have 60% of my income taken. That's unacceptable. I'm not going to work that hard. So when you think about 60% as a percentage of your income, that's one thing, but then think about working January through, what is that? January through August.
Yeah.
So you work January through August, and now you've paid off the government.
Yeah.
And now you get to work September through December, and you get to keep that.
Right,
It's
right.
absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd when you think about it in those terms.
Right.
But we don't think about it in those terms. We just think about it like, oh, yeah, taxes, blah, 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 ha, ha. It's like, yeah, I
Sure.
wish it were lower, and we just go back to work. I mean, we're just like mechanical at this, you know? But then sometimes you wake up and like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to move around, and I'm willing to have someone take 30% of my income. I'm not willing to have someone take 60% of my income. But then you have plenty of those people like the guy with the family who's making probably decent income.
Yeah.
And apparently he doesn't want to move for whatever the reasons are.
Yeah.
And he's willing to go to work and have 60% of his income taken.
And it's social ties. It's so, for me, I'm a single guy. If I'm going to move, let's move. Is the right time to do it. But
I agree with that.
People have so many social ties. My dad wants to move really badly, but my mom, her parents are still there. And, so the people, it's hard for people to move. There's so many different reasons why. And it's interesting because this is the easiest time in the history of the world for someone to move. I mean, it was a missionary that had gone to like India or China, and I think like a one-way ticket. It was one of the Bible translators, but just to get his family like one way was like $200,000 in today's money, right? Wow. So it's like it's the most crazy thing in the world. And they're on a boat like a lot of times, so it's like. And there wasn't any commercial transportation, so it's the easiest time to move, and so because that's true, and the amount of moving that's happening in the last 10 years, we're not going to realize how much it will change the electoral map, the cultural map in 20 years from now. Yes. It'll be different, and it's really kind of interesting.
Do you think it will? How will it be different? Because it's definitely going to be different. Do you think it'll be different for the good, or it's just going to move our problems around the country, or?
I think it'll be for the good, but it'll be for the good because, like cities like Nashville are attracting a lot of different types of people, a lot of different types of voters, and different types of worldviews for a lot of different types of reasons. So it's putting everybody together. But because so much of our community has moved online, then you're still in this like worldview bubble, even though you're living with other people. So that's the problem. I mean,
that is interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Because talking about the Civil War, like how different the cultures were between the South and the North, and how when it got to that point, it was so irreconcilable. And so, you have this agrarian, antiquated culture in the South, so behind, decades behind the rest of the industrialized West. But they're fueling the crop for the industrialized West, digging their own grave. Right before the Civil War, the South was screwed anyways. And so, because they were industrializing like the other places. I mean, it's unbelievable the way. Like the train station in Chicago, it was like the biggest train station ever. It was unfathomable. And they say, why do you build it so big? In like 10 years time, it was outgrown. So it was amazing how much that was happening in the Midwest, coming from the Northeast, and then in the South, there was like this culture that was 100 years behind. Not just in the way they think, which we're talking about, but the way they were built, what their economy is based on. So maybe that divide's still there. People talk about it's so divided nowadays. So I think that's true. It's going to be true, but it's going to be it's not going to be regionally divided because everyone's together in certain cities. So it's going to be
okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So back in even the 90s, if people would have moved around, you would have come in contact with people of different viewpoints and experiences and backgrounds and all of this type of thing. And you would have had more interaction with each other, and you would have had a greater wear-off effect. Mm-hmm. But now, because of social media and algorithms, and Google even contributes to that. Yep. You can move around, people can move around, but you can stay in your bubble.
Yeah, right.
Because we interact so much online, and those algorithms love to feed us stuff that we like.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting
There's
thought.
no Mayberry anymore. There's like this culture. It's like this sheltered little town. That's not a thing anymore, because you can have someone living in rural, like deep south, or like in rural Tennessee, and the kids are growing up with like super progressive ideals, and they're getting it from YouTube and in the like the internet. So you can't. It's not. Everything's so global now. Everything's so interconnected. So yeah, it's like we're divided, but we're still living close by one another. I don't know what's going to happen if there would be a civil conflict, how that would come about. I don't know.
See, that's a very good question. But if there would be a civil conflict, don't you think it would come about very similarly to what we saw this summer, just at an amplified level? Like it would be like a lot of disruption in a lot of cities, in a lot of places, as opposed to sort of like the southern region against the northern region, for example.
Yeah. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen anymore because we're all living around each other, which is a very good thing.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing to be so divided.
Right. Exactly. So, but there's obviously rural regions that are very like different. Obviously, like if you drive an hour east, the people a lot different
Yes.
from Nashville, Metro Nashville. So,
did your dad move to California to begin with for a job opportunity, or did he just loved the state and wanted to go move there for the weather and everything?
So my dad was he was born in Iowa. He was raised in Iowa on a farm for about 10 years. And my grandpa moved there, started a farm, and then it didn't work out.
Moved to California, started a farm?
He was in Iowa. He had moved to California, and then I think he moved back to Iowa. But then so the second time he moved to California, he started a business,
Okay.
a flooring business, and then that really went really well. So it was economic reasons.
In Orange County?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think it was LA County.
Okay. But in the same general area?
Same general area.
Okay.
And so I think people were moving to California for the economic reasons, but also just like it was really awesome. Like it was this new place, and it was like the weather was amazing, and like that was a big part of it too. It was just a really cool place that everyone was moving to. Yeah.
When did you start, or when did you or they start to see this decline that we're now experiencing in California? And by experiencing, I mean I haven't been to California in probably a year, so I'm kind of going off of what people are saying, what I'm reading. I mean, it sounds pretty crazy what's going on out there.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like people are fleeing so much. I don't know
Sure.
if that's just the articles I'm reading or but the homeless, I mean, that's become an issue. I mean, there's people walking out of their $5 million homes. They open their gate and there's needles on the street. I mean, and there's people in tents and
and
it sounds crazy.
It sounds crazy, and that it seems like that's like a conservative right wing talking point where it's like, oh, it's terrible and there's feces everywhere, but it's like I didn't believe it. I was like, okay, yeah, but you go to it and it's true. It's
you
true.
Go to LA.
You go to LA, you go to San Francisco. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, and there's homeless everywhere. Every overpass. I remember like the greatest way of talking about LA is that like I come off the freeway coming from OC, and there's a guy with a brand new Ferrari right at the intersection, and then right next to him is a tent. It's a tent city right on the overpass, and they're sitting right next to each other. And there's this guy like washing himself in this gross water, and he looks absolutely insane, like a mental patient. And they're sitting right next to each other that way and living in the same place.
I mean, it is crazy. Someone was saying, it's a very well-known comedian. I can't think who it was now. He was in like a good part of town, and this is the type of guy who would have like a multi-million-dollar house, and he was at the park with his kid, and some homeless guy was wandering around he got a sword somewhere, and he's just wandering around like sticking the sword into the ground. Right. And he just walked away with his kid and they left. Yeah. I'm people aren't going to put up with that kind of a quality of life, right? I mean, and how did this happen? How did all the homeless, how did this situation come to be?
I think it was like, in the sense that like, come to California 1850s, there's gold to be made, right? There's this kind of like half-truth lie. So everyone came and tried to pan for gold. So in that sense, a lot of like vagabonds and like homeless people that kind of are like that by choice, they heard, wow, come to California. The weather's great, but there's a lot of welfare programs for homeless. And there's no enforcement. So you could camp anywhere or set up shop or whatever, and you'll never be moved. And that's true. So I remember talking to a guy.
Really?
Yeah. I was in the OC at a park. Super.
What's the OC?
Orange County. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Right. So I was in Orange County at a nice park in Costa Mesa. and a homeless guy was talking to me, really nice guy, had a Southern accent. So I started talking to him about it. He was from North Carolina, and he was kind of, it was so funny because like he had come in here for that reason, but now he was like disenfranchised with it. He's like, oh, I want to move back home and all that kind of stuff. And then,
interesting.
and he was talking about how like it was not as good as they said it would be. And he was kind of a homeless guy by choice, which I think is a lot of times the reason why. Or they're very like drug addiction and mental illness.
Yes.
So, but he was saying, I was saying, so he talked to homeless people all the time. It's like, so where are these people from? He's like, bro, they're from all over. None of them are from California. So I think California has 50% of the nation's homeless population.
50%.
Yeah.
About give or take 15% of the population and 50% of the homeless population.
Yeah.
And it's not because everything went wrong in California and everyone laid everyone off and no one had jobs and everyone became homeless.
No.
It's more because the state has such good welfare system that homeless people move in to be taken care of by the state.
Being taken care of by the state, and then also there's no enforcement, so they can do whatever they want, and they're not going to be there's no squatter laws to use an antiquated term. They can go wherever they want, and they won't be enforced. I remember I was in Oakland, like San Francisco area, and there was whole like beautiful brand new parks that were completely overtaken by homeless in the middle of these nice areas, just tents everywhere, and they've been there for months. And no one's doing anything about it, and that's not a thing. I think so. That was the idea, and he said they were from all over the place. He said they're not from California.
So if that's the case, then doesn't that give us some insight as a country into what would happen if we would do something like universal basic income?
Yeah,
which I don't know really enough about to have an opinion on that.
Yeah, and
do things like, to the extreme, like defund the police, which I know defund the police doesn't always mean get rid of the police.
Sure.
It can mean we keep funding the police. Well, I guess by definition you wouldn't keep funding the police the exact same. But the one the thing I found interesting with defund the police was to incorporate more social workers. Mm-hmm. And when someone's missing a dog or there's a mental health interaction, or something like that the police aren't going to those quite as quickly, which sounds like a fine idea to me. But getting rid of the police, we could look at California then as a case study and say that might not be a good that might not be a good practice, because this is what happens when we don't have laws or we don't enforce them. Mm-hmm. And we give people, I don't know, too much of a handout, which I hate to say, because a lot of people need help, right? So
exactly, we
want to help, but if there's no incentive to work, then this is what you're going to wind up with.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. It's so crazy. And how do you remedy, like now where they're at now, like what do you do at that point? I mean, it's so crazy. I know I think San Diego County did a good job with their homeless issue. They had emergency shelters. So they built up a bunch of emergency shelter infrastructure, and then when they say, hey, we have emergency shelter, you need to, like people that were building at tents, you need to go to that emergency shelter. If you don't, we'll throw you in jail, I guess. And so, because they give them an outlet, and so that worked out pretty well. But a lot of people, they don't stay there. I don't know. It's so hard, and it's just a sad thing that like churches and culturally churches were taking care of homeless, and now it's not the case, and the government's taking care of homeless, and they're not doing a good job about it. So,
well, that's a pretty good, I think, case study in and of itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we do a better job of taking care of each other, or we should. When we care to take care of each other, we do a better job of that than if we go through the government to do it, because the government's very inefficient.
Yeah, right.
Andrew, can you Google and see how many homeless are in California? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's super centralized, and this for sure.
To the question of, well, I mean, the thing is, if you're going to go through the government to help with some of these things, and you give $1 to the government, like how much of that dollar makes it actually back onto the street to help people? Like 20 cents?
Yeah.
15 cents, you know what I mean? It's not $1, for sure not. To the question, like, what do you do when it gets that bad? I mean, that's a very big question. I'm sure they're working on it.
Yeah.
Like what? You'd almost have to like put up free housing, offer them free housing.
Yeah.
But
a lot of them don't want to be in it.
Are not going to want to be in it.
Because with the housing, they always have rules like no drugs in the house. You have to do certain things, and people don't want to abide by those. Mm-hmm. So they go into housing, they're kicked out, or it's destroyed. So it just doesn't. it's like a vagabond class of people, which have been around for a while, but we've like earlier in the United States, they did really crazy things. Like if you were found as like a hobo, they would throw you on a chain gang and you'd start building gravel roads for like years.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean, a lot of the train railroads that were built like in the frontier in the West were built by hobos. That there was no crime whatsoever. They were just sitting around, just the crime of sitting around, and they were thrown on a chain gang for years.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Well, that was one of the. Did you find how many homeless?
Yes, according to calmatters.org, at last official count, 151,278 individuals are homeless in California, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's the highest number since at least 2007 and represents a nearly 17% uptick since 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Just 2018, wow.
But what's interesting about that is like, if the government really needed to fund free housing for 150,000 people, they could do it. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we can't afford it. We can print money. We could do it. The question, the issue is like getting the people to actually go live there. And when you say California has the best sort of welfare system, do you know what that is? Like, do they just pay people for existing?
Yeah.
They get free money, and how much?
So it's like free healthcare, like dental and things like that. I know places like Washington and Oregon had that as well. And so they have a bigger homeless, like Seattle and Portland have big homeless populations because they heard about that. But I'm not entirely sure on that.
So they're not necessarily, it's not like universal basic income where you're paying them to be there.
Yeah.
But you do get free healthcare. Interesting on that note, I know someone who, he and his wife are moving to California at the end of this year. Like they're running into the fire, so to speak. Like they're moving into California.
Literally fire, yeah.
Yeah. Not for the politics or anything like that, but for the free healthcare for in vitro. They wanted to have kids. And
sure.
I'm kind of assuming here that they can't afford the healthcare or the cost of those operations or whatever. And they're moving to California because it's free out there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. So there's tons of different reasons why people move so it's such a big thing to think about, but I don't know. I think it's weird how I think when you think of after the Civil War, especially in the South, right, where everything was completely destroyed, like there was no bridge left standing, no railroad left laid, no field left unburned, right? Everything was absolutely destroyed, like an atom bomb went off, which is what had to happen to win the war, and I wonder, and obviously, like the Union had 2.4 million people, men that were eligible to serve, and they didn't serve. And guess how many of the South had eligible men that didn't serve? Zero. So every single person, every single man, every single head of household was affected by the war in some way. And all the industry was destroyed. And so they recovered, but some of the parts of the South haven't recovered yet. Like some of the most poorest states in the Union are still southern states. Mississippi, Louisiana, places like that have not recovered. But some have recovered, like this like new tech, high growth things like Texas and Tennessee and North Carolina. So, and now people are flocking to these states that were historically destroyed, leveled to the ground, and had not recovered yet. So it's
that is interesting.
Yeah.
I want you to go deep on the Civil War for us. I do not know. I'm not a history buff here, so I want to hear that. But you just said something that was interesting to me, and it could be one of those things where, like we were just reading that stat there about how California spends more annually on welfare than we listed off. Like how many states we listed off? Like 15, so many states. And that's true that California may spend more than those states combined. But then if you also don't know the population of all those other states, it might be that they spend more than those other states on welfare for good reasons. Like it sounds like maybe they do spend a little bit too much on welfare or more than they should or more than they can afford or whatever. But also like you're only getting part of the story.
Right.
You mentioned something that was interesting to me, which is that back whenever it was, if you were a hobo, you were... What is that? Basically, someone who's just vagabonding, has no job, just kind of living life out. Just
if you were sitting like in the town square on a weekday and you weren't going to job, you could be taken by one of those gangs and just completely lambasted. In
like the government, like that was a thing. The government would take you. So it wasn't like some rogue gang would come pick you up.
Yeah, I wonder if it was government or it was companies that were like unregulated, people that were like building the railroads and stuff like that. But like it was the whole like, oh, brother, we're out that kind of thing where they're like on a chain gang.
Okay,
like,
yes.
So they were prison gangs, but they were also just like hobos and stuff.
Okay, interesting. So I was aware of that, but the context that I read it in, it was in a book that I read this summer, the book was about racial inequities, and its point was that we had slavery, and then if you were, a black man who wasn't able to get a job quickly, they would grab you again and put you to work in these gangs. Okay,
right. That happened too. Yeah.
But it was the case whether you were white or black is now what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't like if you happened to be a black man who couldn't find a job. It was like if you didn't have a job at all.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm sure it was worse on the end of black Americans, but
well, it had to be because they didn't have like that family history of a farm or the family business, like. So but
that was happening everywhere, even in the north.
Everywhere. Yeah,
like as far as like throwing, with all the thing, everyone moving west. That was a lot of that was built by like innocent people or whatever.
Yeah,
that weren't getting paid or.
Okay, Civil War. Let's go on that.
Yeah.
What do you know about the Civil War? Sounds like you know a lot. And just for the record, before we turned on the mics to record, I think I heard you tell Andrew that you got a haircut to like throw back to the Civil War. So you might not. You're saying you don't know a lot, but obviously you know some history here.
Well, my fashion icons, a bit of a hipster, would be Ulysses S. Grant and stuff.
Oh no! Oh,
but I guess
go.
Haircuts were harder to come by in those days. So you'd have long hair on the sides and on the top, and you kind of combed it back. Yeah. But I don't know. But I don't know
what is it
a
about
lot.
the Civil War that attracts you or that's interesting?
So when I was a kid, and your heroes were guys. Warfighters, like American warfighters, but I hated the Civil War. I didn't want to learn about it at all because it was this idea of Americans fighting each other, and that made me sick as a little kid. So I was much more attracted to like World War II, really good, the good Americans fighting the evil Nazis. That was easier to swallow. But when I became an adult and like lived more of life, the complexities of life, how so many choices we make are tragedies. The Civil War became so attractive in that way because it's such a great example of why war is so interesting to learn about, because like the worst of humanity and the best of humanity are spilled out onto the battlefield. And it's something that as a human race, we are addicted to war because of that. Like the humanity's greatest sorrows and humanity's greatest joys, the examples of the greatest betrayals and cowardice and the greatest honor and courage are all there in that same moment, more vividly than it would be in any other part of the history. And so Civil War is probably the greatest as an American, but even it has so much people outside of America love it too in that way. And then to know that it's still the problems going on are still part of the culture in some way. And that's very interesting, but I like to talk about the soldiers themselves and like these people that they found a reason to fight. And they were trying to find a reason to fight even after the reasons they enlisted for became a lie or meaningless. And they still found it, like even after, I think after the volunteer soldiers in the union, this is just the union, it was a 3-year term, had expired. So majority of the army were volunteer soldiers. They had no military training whatsoever. So there was some of those big fights like in Shiloh, like a majority of those guys had not even seen any combat, had been doing like marching drills. Like there was artillery batteries that hadn't shot a cannon once.
Oh man! And
so that's why it was so savage. It was a bunch of people like us, literally like us, just trying to figure out how to kill human beings in mass numbers. And so after that, a lot of their contracts were expiring at the end of 1863, and which was the so that and a lot of them had volunteered again after that. And so it's an interesting historical phenomenon because why would they volunteer to do this again? And they were the best fighters too, because there were some guys that were like these bounty men that were getting paid like thousands of dollars to come fight, and they were terrible soldiers. and the volunteer soldiers were the best. And they found a meaning in that. And the meaning really comes, I think it's every time in a soldier's meaning is the purpose itself is the pride and the honor of being a soldier in and of itself. It's the camaraderie that people talk about. I remember there was a soldier diary that he had just left. He had to leave for like 30 days, and he talked about how he missed the camaraderie when he was back home on the farm in peace and safety, and he missed the camaraderie that he had with the people, the men that he was with. So that is so much fun to talk about.
Are you saying that was true for both the North and South soldiers, or particularly the South?
That was true on both sides, and so that's why they found so much commonality with each other. Which is so fascinating. A lot of times, like the instant injured soldiers would always work together to try to get to. There's a great story. I think it was Antietam in Maryland, and there was a big Southern boy that had gotten his eyes shot out, and then there was a federal soldier, a Union soldier, that his legs were incapacitated, so he couldn't move. So the big the blind man put him on his shoulders, and the Union guy navigated them to a Union medic camp. And they once you were a casualty of the war, you're instantly friends because there's some kind of weird friendship that's there, even though just a moment later you were murdering each other, killing each other in mass. So it's a cool, and they made it there, and they both got cared for there.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, part of that makes sense. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people that are like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
But when you think about in terms of you're entering the war, whether you're in the North or South, for these reasons, and now you're joining a cause for whatever those reasons are, but now you have joined the cause, and you're going to fight for the cause. And then you have the other side, and they're fighting for their cause, but you're both Americans. And when you're able and you're healthy, you're fighting, and you're fighting for the cause. When you're injured, you can't contribute to the cause anymore.
Yeah.
And so now you're now it's just me and you, right? I mean, now it's just me and you, and we're both injured. Yeah. We can't contribute to the cause anymore. So I don't have a problem with you. So why am I going to slit your throat? You know what I mean?
Or it's just a game, but it's a game with human lives. So when it's a sport in that sense, it's a game. Once the game's over, it's not a big deal anymore. You can hang out. But it's an insanely terrible thing. But your job, you're playing a game. The job is to annihilate the enemy, and that's what they were doing. I think. Two, the coolest part about the Civil War, the positive way, was that it was a unifying force for America. And in some ways it wasn't. We talk about the negative parts and the terrible things, how in Reconstruction, ushering in Jim Crow, and another 100 years of injustice that happened. Terrible, terrible stuff. But one of the amazing things is you had these two different cultures that had never ventured, like the common guy had never ventured to the South. A guy from Pennsylvania or Ohio, and other guys from Alabama had never gone to the North. And then that in this war of actually killing each other, they found themselves amongst each other and learned about each other. And it actually created the nation even more so than it ever had before. And wow, it's an amazing thing to see that it actually the Civil War is a crossroads of our being. And it was during, unlike any other war, and it was then and it is now. And it's a hell of a crossroads. And I think Shelby Foote said that. He's an author of the Civil War. I remember in Ken Bird's Civil War documentary, he said that. But it's a crossroads of our being. And so it's the heart of America that's there. And so you can never learn it all because it's this ongoing thing. It's this thing that's alive. And the people that died, their stories are kind of still unresolved.
Yeah. Have you been yet to the Tennessee State Museum?
No, I haven't. I need to go. Yeah.
I took, this was a few weeks ago. All of our kids were still in virtual school, and there was about a 2-week stretch there where I was in charge of my 10-year-old and 8-year-old. They were coming to the office here, doing their schoolwork, and I was doing my thing. This was before we kind of launched the podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was in charge of their education for 2 weeks, and it was virtual, so they were online, but still, my 8-year-old, he was done after like 2 hours. So it's like I was helping him learn to read and all these types of things. And so I took him to the Tennessee State Museum, and not a history buff, but it's a pretty good museum. It's totally free.
I heard
there's a lot, and there's obviously a lot in there about the Civil War.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sure you'd really enjoy it.
Right.
How do you Okay, so then what's your take on the reason for the war? Confederate States, the Confederate flag. Of course, you have the one viewpoint, which is like, I feel like you hear this a little bit maybe more from, I think it depends on kind of where you're from in the state or in the country, but
Yeah.
some would argue, hey, the Confederate flag's not the worst thing in the world anymore because it was about states' rights.
Yeah.
And others would say, yeah, that is the worst thing in the world. Don't ever show it again because it was about slavery.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
So the flag, the Confederate flag was a battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia. So it wasn't the nation's flag. The nation's flag looked very different. If you could see, Andrew could pull it up. It looked more like the American flag. It was
the nation's flag.
The Confederate States of
flag?
America flag. Their national flag was not the St. Andrew's Stars and Bars cross that we know of as the Confederate flag.
That was a flag in North
Carolina. That was a battle flag. No, it was a flag of the Army of Northern Virginia, Lee's army. It was his battle flag, which became so infamous because really all the hopes of the Confederacy was built upon that army. There's many armies that were in the Civil War, Confederate armies, but that army itself was that. So it became that. But so it's a battle flag, and then it was a square flag. It wasn't a rectangle flag with white borders. Yeah, you can see. So that's a late iteration. They had changed it later once that Stars and Bars flag became more prevalent. If you scroll up a little bit, Andrew, should show the other one. Yeah, see those are the first. That's the first. First flag of the Confederacy there, which was just the 7 states that seceded at first. And it was basically the American flag, but with all the other states subtracted.
It
right?
really is.
Yeah, right. And then one other.
It's red, white, and blue, but there's just 7 stars, and there's 2 red bars and 1 white bar in between.
Exactly, and it's kind of like Texas flag, where Texas is the American flag, but minus 49 states. It's just the one Texas state. Really funny.
Interesting.
But and then later, but it was so hard to see the flags on the battlefield because they looked exactly the same. So they changed it eventually. But so that's the historical context. So. The flag was used when the Confederate flag became known as like synonymous with pro-segregation was during the Civil Rights Movement, and there's real things that happen with both are true. There's like this heritage narrative that's just there, and it just means like Southern pride, or it means like American rebelliousness. Like you'll see people. You can go into rural areas in Ohio and you'll see a Confederate flag, and they're like, "Well, Ohio was a Union state," but it's like this rebel thing. So there's that, but the things that really happen, the pictures of people like protesting the integrations of schools and them waving the flag, or the Ku Klux Klan using the flag, that is real. That really happened. So when people use the flag for not those reasons, right? Like we see people flying it, they need to realize that that's real. And so there's real experiences. And I think the Ku Klux Klan started using the flag after the centennial of the Civil War, when it became more in vogue. So I think if you look at like the Washington marches from the KKK, like in the 1915 or 1920, they were using American flags. I don't think you'll see a Confederate flag in that march. Which is very, very interesting. So now the American flag is not seen as a KKK thing, which is great, but they were using that too for a long time, and then they started using. I know there's a lot of cool stories where like you'll see like Southern veterans, a lot of like in the World War II, there's like Japanese forts that had been overtaken in the Pacific, and there's an American flag, and you see a Confederate flag flying over it. And Southern boys had gone up there and put their flags above things they captured, which is really funny. So that was all there, but it became known as that, and then the KKK started using it, and that's where it is now. So I think it just needs to become an historical thing. I know the fraternal organizations that used it early post Reconstruction, like the United Sons of Confederate Veterans and the Daughters of Confederacy, they wanted historical control over it and said, don't fly it, only fly it in certain places that are sanctioned. And I think the reason why they did that is because they didn't want it to be bamboozled by like the KKK and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it happened, and that happened. So that's already happened. So it's been put into that reality. So I think it needs to be something that's just historical and not something that anybody will just fly. But it's not going to stop because it's America and people want to do what they want to do. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
But now, so I'm not well versed in these things, but when I see someone like this past summer, kind of at the height of the tension, a lot of it was the racial tension, that was going on in this country. There was a guy on horseback riding through downtown Franklin with a Confederate flag, And so,
wow,
I don't know his motives. I don't know what he's about. But when I see something like that, I feel like, dude, come on, man. Like, it was a white man,
right.
Of course, I guess.
Right.
And I just kind of feel like, and that guy hates black people, like that's sort of like, dude, or maybe he doesn't, but like, do you really need to do that? It feels like you're waving this flag in people's face. You're kind of throwing mud on people's face here. And it seems like you're probably not going to be, it seems like the assumption is, I guess, like there's some racial issues going on or maybe some prejudices.
Sure.
Is that accurate, or could that guy just be flying his flag because he's still into states' freedoms or something? You know what I mean? Like, is that a legitimate concern for someone who's walking around at the height of tensions that we had going on in summer with their Confederate flag? Or is it not? This has nothing to do with race for him at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. It's hard. It's hard to know. I think like all the neo-Confederate stuff that has happened. Like I remember going to like this big store when I was in South Carolina, like coming from California, the first time I've ever been to the South. And like I was driving right outside of Greenville in upstate South Carolina, and there's this big like Dixie Republic or something, this giant place in the middle of nowhere. It was all Confederate stuff. And so I went in there, and it was just super interesting talking to those guys and stuff. But they had quotes on shirts that like from Robert E. Lee that were just completely not true at all. Absolute lies. And I'm like a Civil War guy, and I like a lot of the Southern characters in the war, just like I like the Northern guys. So, so there was all the neo-Confederates. So a lot of this stuff is based on so much historical inaccuracy. But if you say that, right, if you say that it's true also on the other side. So the people that look at the war, like I remember a lot of people taking down monuments. They'll use like in Knoxville, there was somebody using like war quotes from the mayor of Knoxville in the height of the Civil War, saying like, we're going to fight them till hell freezes over. And it's like, why are you posting war quotes like the war's still going on? Like that needs to be condemned, just like neo-Confederates should be, because you're missing the whole point of the war. The whole point of the war is when you see in the 1910, when you see this reenactment of Pickett's charge at Gettysburg with the veterans that were actually in the charge, where in 1863. July 1863, they were marching in an open field as Union batteries were shooting canister shot, which is a charge of 70 big lead balls, like a cannonball shotgun, that they were shooting at the ground and having it bounce up into a wall of men that at one time, like 15 men or so would just disappear like that. And I think it was like 6,000 guys just marching an open field more than a mile, right? So that was happening. And then the same veterans came, and as they got to the cemetery ridge where the Union guys were, they hugged as brothers, and they had they're now they're as friends, and that is something we need to take from the war. That narrative needs to be. I wish it was more prevalent, even though there's so many. All the other terrible narratives of war, like Lincoln, the hero we all needed, dying too early, and then Reconstruction happening, and Jim Crow ushering in and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. The terrible stuff that happened. There's all the great things that happened in the war, and how even like a lot of the runaway slaves that had meandered into Union camps, and all these guys from the Midwest not ever seeing a Black American ever, and them learning more about them and hearing how they talked and hearing what they believed, and they. That was this indirect way of where, when emancipation happened, the common soldier fighting for the Federal Army for preserving the Union, they became more in line of liberating these enslaved people. And it didn't come from the top down. It came from them seeing them like little by little, and them coming into the camp and wanting to be a part of this war. And then them making it as individual actors, making it about a war of emancipation, a war of liberation. And that's a beautiful thing, because it's Americans coming to meet one another and to learn more about each other, even if one of those Americans was considered not an American at that time.
So you're saying as black people were fleeing the South, coming to the North, joining the Union Army, the Union soldiers may have gotten into the war with a different sort of motive in mind, but as they got to know their black brothers in this war, then on the Union side, these individual soldiers kind of in their motivations in their, I guess, hearts, so to speak, now they're starting to fight for the cause of emancipation.
Yeah.
When all along they were fighting in the war, they were fighting to win their side of the war.
Sure.
It just wasn't so much for emancipation.
No, they
as they got to know these black people, that it became more about that. Yeah,
exactly. I think majority of people that volunteer soldiers, they had volunteered for the adventure. Well, soldiers fought for a bunch of different reasons. And so the reasons that the elites started the war for were completely different from the reasons the normal, average, everyday person fought, right? A lot of them fought for money. This is the best job opportunity they could chop wood the rest of their life or be a corn farmer, and they could join the army and make a bunch of money. A lot of them joined for the adventure. A lot of recruiters used that idea. Oh, the adventure, going over the United States. Even nowadays, the army will do that. They have these really cool commercials in The Great Adventure, which some of that might be true, or it is true. And then, so that was true. And then some of them fought for defending their homeland and seeing that way, right? I think on both sides, but that southern side did that a lot too. But yeah, they because in the North there was like the minstrel shows, which was like making a mockery of like black Americans. There was a lot of minstrel shows in the North, so they've never encountered black slaves like they would have. They would have after, like they did after the war or during the war, even before emancipation. So there's a lot of, and they became, and then obviously that became even more apparent when they started making colored battalions. So like 180,000 black Americans fought for the Union Army, and so that was even more true. They saw them 180,000. Yeah, so they saw them fight even more, and seeing them fight, that was a big deal. So it unified the country in that way. At least mixing that the people group, 4 million slaves in the South, mixing with the North, and seeing that way. So,
what kind of shows did you say they were doing? The minstrel shows?
Minstrel shows, yeah, minstrel shows.
What is it? Minstrel
shows.
Minstrel?
Minstrel, yeah. So it was
like the menstrual thing.
Yeah, it was like a sideshow tent show where they would have these comical characters, and there weren't always. But it's the classic like racial stereotypes that they have this like black face. That was from minstrel shows, and they like the song Dixie, like I wish I was in Dixie. That was a minstrel tune, but was played in minstrel shows. But it was wrote by a guy, I don't know where he was from, but he might have been from Ohio or Illinois, right? So he wrote that minstrel show, and then it became the anthem kind of the South. So that was a minstrel tune, and so there were like these little shows, and there'd be a bunch of funny characters that would, but some of that was making fun of like these funny, weird characters that were impersonating a black slave. So that was a minstrel show. So they had those in the North too. Yeah.
So what were the motivations for the war then? You said it was varying, you know, for the people in power and the people fighting the war. But what's your take on the? Well, not even your take. What's your understanding then of the different motivations of this war?
Yeah, people are still
it's complicated.
People are still debating it nowadays. But I think the South had dug its own grave before the war. I think that's really important. Like I was saying, they were fueling through cotton. They were fueling the industrialization of not only the North but also Europe. And so in doing so, they weren't industrializing themselves. So if the war never happened, the South had been screwed anyways. Their economy would have been destroyed. Because we got to the point where chattel slavery would become pointless because things like the cotton gin, right? Things that manpower was needed for wasn't the case anymore. So their whole economy would have been destroyed anyway. So they knew that, right? All the elites that had like the commercial elites and the political elites knew that. And so when so that was happening, and there was moral revolutions happening in the North. This is really important. So temperance, women's suffrage, abolition, obviously, and then prohibition. So there was these moral movements funneled by the Second Great Awakening happening like the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, where people were people had time to be moral, right? It wasn't just about like surviving all the time. Now people had like we don't even talk about like the idea of just trying to be more ethical or being more moral is a liberty in and of itself. Life was better, so people were learning what it means to be a Christian, be an American, what it meant. So living up to ideals that they never did. So those were happening in the North, and then the South was building its own grave. So once abolition was getting more prevalent, they were getting more political power. Finally, a president was elected that was an abolitionist from an abolitionist party, Republican Party. The South couldn't do anything besides that. There was a bunch of compromises, we failed to compromise, which when politics fails to compromise, the only thing left to do is kill each other, right? The only reason politics is there so that we don't kill each other by arguing with stuff. Politics is a very moral thing, even though it's seen as so immoral now, if you talk about politics. But politics is it's one of the greatest inventions known in modern civilization because it makes it so we don't kill each other over arguments, right? And that's how it used to be. So anyway, so that was happening. And so once the elite and then like the fire eaters in the South, they had no other choice but to secede, to take to keep the hold of their power over the industries like the cotton industries and stuff like that. So they had to do it. There was no, and it was at the expense of the normal person. They weren't the ones fighting, of course. But yeah.
So it's almost like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it's like in the North, they had what they needed to survive, and then they started to have what they needed to thrive. And as they had what they needed to thrive, and your day-to-day wasn't so much just focused on just surviving and just having enough food for just that one day, or having shelter and protection for just that one day, then you can start to look around and say, well, what else is out there? What's the next step?
Yeah.
How can we make our world better? How can we make this country better? And that kind of bled into, hey, there's some injustices going on, and now let's go correct those.
Right. Yeah. And so a lot of the abolitionaries in the North were like super hardcore. Like even throughout the whole war, they were frustrated with Lincoln. Like they believed in annihilation too, but not as the annihilation of the black slaves, but annihilations of the white Southerners. Like there's some crazy things that went on with like Horace Greeley and guys like that. And even like as they celebrated in Charleston when South Carolina seceded, there was people in New York when they found out they seceded celebrating in the streets too, that there was going to be a terrible war, right? And so they were rejoicing because of for abolition, that there would be a terrible war. And so it's hard because it's like this, like I was saying, it's like the human heart where we have this strong sense of justice in our hearts given by God, but becoming like radicalizing over it, and how oftentimes it results in mass bloodshed, right? And so like 650,000 people were killed in the Civil War, and some people have said it was upwards of 850,000. And if you take casualties, it's like 1.5 million casualties, and so that's people that killed, wounded, or captured.
How does that number compare to American casualties or deaths in World War I and II?
Yeah, so World War II was, I think, like 180,000. Can you look that up for me, Andrew? But the percentages wise is the best way to put it. So I think it was 6% of the nation's men died in the Civil War, which is proportionally, I think, would be six. It would be like us going to war now and losing 6 million people.
Golly.
Yeah. Which is unheard of. I mean, that happened. It happened in World War II in some places, but not with America. With like the Soviet Union was unbelievable, but the amount of casualties they had. But yeah, it was terrible, and that's one of the reasons why I love the war too. Because when my heroes are these soldiers, the American soldiers, that's the most brutal war there is. Right? Some of these guys went into battles with casualty rates going up to 30%. Of their unit or their brigade or their corps going up 30%. That's unheard of. Like things in like Vietnam and World War II, these terrible wars, the casualty rate for like a unit was like 3% or 5% every battle. So this is insane. Like going into a battle, 30% of the guys are either going to get killed, wounded, or captured. And that is the most savage thing in the world. I mean, it's so brutal. I mean, people think about the Civil War like these guys marching in the open field for no reason. It's not as exciting as kind of like this urban combat.
Mm-hmm.
Us as guys liking that kind of that aspect of war, but man, it is so brutal, and there's some really cool things in it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the numbers certainly line up.
Yeah.
I'll throw it up here, but I'll read it out loud for our audio listeners as well. According to battlefields.org, approximately 620,000 soldiers died from combat, accident, starvation, and disease during the Civil War.
yeah,
Further down here is the little graph that where you can see it's 620,000 in the Civil War. Second is World War II at 405,000. Even less in World War I was 116,000, and then Vietnam at 58,000. And then you've got the Korean War at 36, and then Revolutionary War at 25.
Revolutionary War, 25,000. War of 1812, 20,000. Mexican War, 13,000. Look at this. Iraq, Afghanistan, 6,600.
yeah,
Spanish-American War, 2,400. And Gulf War, 258.
yeah, and obviously those are padded because both sides were Americans. Because that 650,000 is counting both sides. So that's why the Civil War, obviously. So yeah, it's when both sides, every casualty in the war is an American. So that obviously is going to be more devastating.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Who was that Greeley guy you mentioned?
Horace Greeley.
Horace Greeley.
Yeah.
What's his
He
what's
was,
his deal?
I don't know enough to talk about him, but he was, I think he was a journalist or something like that, but he was part of if you bring that up, but he was a popular abolitionist in that day, I think. And so he was I think he was against Lincoln's reelection because they wanted to get someone more hardcore in there.
Hardcore, as in
Hardcore
let's
abolition,
win
yeah.
the war and then let's go just wipe everyone out in the South.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say, but there was definitely people with that idea. So, and that's the thing too, like even that idea, like someone fighting for a good cause, that idea of like this revolutionary, radical, ends justify the means, utopian ideology, that needs to be condemned too, because even though it's for a righteous, good cause, and it was, but other Western countries that had slaves, they got rid of slavery. It was a cost, but they didn't fight a war over it. And so the Civil War is looked at as a moral triumph that we fought a war to end slavery. But in one sense, that's true. The other sense, it's not, because it was a failure because we failed to compromise and we couldn't end slavery like the UK could peacefully. We had to kill 650,000 people to do it, and that's a terrible cost.
Yeah.
So
That's a great point. I recently read a book. It's over there somewhere called The Clapham Sect, and it talks about William Wilberforce's instrumental role in abolishing slavery. And I mean, it took everything they had, man. It wasn't like, oh, this one man stood up and went forward and abolished slavery.
Easy.
No, it was years and years and years of working through the political system and jockeying and positioning and money and getting people on your side, and then you get voted down and you don't quit and you come back again a year later and you present another bill and you work through all of that and you get turned down again and you don't quit and you go on, and next year, I mean, it was like, people were like, their health was failing because they were so targeted, so focused on abolishing slavery, and it came at a great cost, but it did come through the political system over there. It absolutely did.
Yep. Yeah, and our politics failed. It was a failure of politics.
So would some argue that, yes, it was a failure of politics, but that was because the South or the North, I guess, but particularly the South just wasn't willing to play ball?
Yeah, totally. They wouldn't compromise, and they couldn't compromise. Right? I mean, they had no choice, because I said, like, they had no leverage. They had no leverage. Their whole economy was based on slavery, in the sense that on that agrarian economy, chattel based economy. So
if you say that they were all working in the cotton fields and it was doomed to fail anyway because we were becoming more industrialized and they wouldn't have needed this free labor to build what they had, but couldn't they have used that free labor to build cities and greater infrastructure? Like, couldn't have the labor just moved from cotton fields into more industrialized type labor?
Yeah, I think so. But I don't know. It's not that simple. And like the fact that, like, there's someone like in a in a boardroom thing, like what is our economy going to be based on? But
it's true.
Right,
And if you
it's so
build,
indirect. So
you're right. And if you build infrastructure, for what?
Right,
And if you grow your
right.
cities, for what? Like there still needs to be commerce.
they found themselves in that situation over decades and decades of building the modern world.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it worked,
Mhm.
and they're so yeah.
Who to you are some of your heroes of the South, or some of your kind of valiant men in the South that you that you have studied up on, or that are interesting to you, or even that are respectable to you?
Sure. Yeah, I think I love guys like I love Jeb Stuart. He was a Virginia born high class born guy. He was the command general over Lee's cavalry in the Civil War, and he was this extravagant character that he was very much a cavalier. So he had an ostrich plume hat and he had a red shawl, and he would make sure he looked great before he went into battle. It's kind of old fashioned character. He was very popular in Europe too. They loved him in Europe. And when you learn more about these guys, they become you can see his hat there. But he was
he's holding it on his lap.
he was 31 when he died, and in the war he was 29, but you learn about these guys, and they're just amazing, larger than life characters, and we know they are. But when you learn about them more, it's not dispelled. They're mythic on both sides, and the South has a lot of them like that. But he went to he did go to VMI or West Point, but he loved Shakespeare. And he was in like the Shakespeare club in school. So you have these guys, these like lovers and these fighters, like these full men that we miss so much in nowadays when we try to understand what it means to be a man. Like we see both ways too much. Like there's very passive, no backbone, and the guys that are just too macho. But these guys were like these full men that were well versed in literature and art, but like were total. Great fighters.
Yeah.
So one of the great his whole story of his death is wonderful because he was right outside of Richmond. It was 1864 at Yellow Tavern, but he had just met his wife the day before, and then he was in a cavalry engagement with Phil Sheridan and way outnumbered. So right when he was leaving the battle, a dismounted Union cavalry took out his Colt army and took a pop shot at Jeb Stuart and got him right in this, hit him right in the gut. And so he had a gut wound, and he was rushed back into Richmond and just bled out for a day. And his wife couldn't get into Richmond and see him. And I remember he said, when he was on his deathbed, this is the cool things too about why the Civil War is great, because there was such a Christian aspect to the Civil War on both sides. So being a Christian is really cool to learn about that because it's so prevalent. It's like it's one of the major parts of the war of how they saw themselves that way. So he insisted, can someone please play or sing Rock of Ages for me, because it was his favorite hymn, right? And so we know that if you understand the hymn Rock of Ages, like what it's saying, you know the Lord.
Yeah.
Like it's so perfect in that way, and he wanted to desperately hear Rock of Ages. So he did, and then I think he just said his last thing he said was, "My service is complete, and this is the will of God," and he died in that way. So and it's amazing pictures of faith, even fighting for a side that had a terrible cause, but found him as a Virginian fighting for his state and doing what he was supposed to do. And then I know his wife couldn't see him, and she didn't get to see him before he died. And then she was in mourning for the rest of her life. She was young in her 20s, and she was known to wear black the rest of her life. Never remarried. Never was over that mourning. She was in mourning the rest of her life, and like those kinds of love, they didn't read self-help books on how to have a good marriage or how to love one another really well. They just seemed they could do it, and they embraced tragedy. They embraced sadness. Yeah, I mean, there's amazing characters, man. But
so when you have a guy like Jeb, and I see those are initials for something,
yeah,
right?
James Ewell Brown Stewart. Yeah.
Oh, strong name.
James Ewell Brown. Yeah.
So when you have a guy like that, and he's fighting for his state and his side, and he's doing it bravely and valiantly, and in a lot of ways, he's probably doing it like it's part of his services to the Lord, right? Like he feels like there's a duty there that was asked of him, and so he's going to go fight.
Yeah,
and then on his deathbed, he wants to hear Rock of Ages.
Yeah,
and I don't know if there's a statue on him or not, but if there was or if there is,
right.
Like the prevailing sentiment right now is to go rip that statue down,
Sure.
right? Because he was on the wrong side of history, is
Right.
what people would say.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. You want to read that, Andrew? That quote? That's a great one.
This is an account of his last moments that I've highlighted. As his aide, he's been wounded at this point, he's dying. As his aide, Major McClellan, left his side, Confederate President Jefferson Davis came in, took General Stuart's hand, and asked, "General, how do you feel?" Stuart answered, "Easy, but willing to die, if God and my country think I have fulfilled my destiny and done my duty." His last whispered words were, "I am resigned. God's will be done." He died at 7:38 p.m. on May 12th, the following day, before Flora Stewart, his wife, reached his side.
Yeah.
He was 31 years old.
Yeah, isn't that cool? And it's like we all want to die that way, right?
We do,
right?
yeah.
Like we all want to be our last quotes, a sediment of faith in God. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So
it's so touching.
it is.
you know?
And it's so, you read about there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories like this. And it just goes on both sides. It's just the most amazing thing in the world. Not to everyone, but man, I love it. It never ends. But to what you were saying about the statue thing, well, there was a statue of Jeb Stuart in Richmond. It was just taken down maybe last month. There's a hall of statues. It was a big 40-foot, 50-foot statue of him on a horse, and they just took it down. So I think with everything there should be a compromise. I think the greatest compromise we could do for those statues is taking down the political figure statues. Like if you were to take down I understand taking down Jefferson Davis, but there needs to be some kind of charity given to these generals and war fighters that were fighting. Just they didn't have political bones in their bodies. There would be reporters asking Lee, and he just, I don't really care. Like it wasn't about the politics. These guys weren't political guys. Some of them became political guys after. Some of them became, but a lot of them weren't those guys. Their art was war. Their art was being a soldier, and so there's something. So they were being an American soldier in that sense, and so there's something to be respected in that way. But they became these like figures that were part of like that lost cause mythos. So it's hard, but they're non-political actors. So taking like PGT Beauregard or Jeb Stuart, it's like, well, they were just fighters. And I get taking down a Confederate president. That makes total sense. But
in a situation like Jeb's statue, where was that and where did it go?
So it was in the middle of Richmond, like in the middle of downtown. There was like the Hall of, what is it? It's like the Hall of Statues, and there was all these amazing, like these big, amazing statues. I think Lee's is still up, but they're going to take it down soon. They might have taken it down, but so there's all these statues of all these like generals and stuff of the war. And so
where do they take them?
That one is in storage right now, and so I think there's like a historical society, Jeb Stuart's historical society, that wants to get the statue. They'll put it at his gravesite, I get, probably, which will be in a field somewhere, in a battlefield outside of Richmond. So it won't be in the middle of Richmond. It'll be in a historical battlefield, which is probably where it should be. Makes sense. And obviously, the idea too is that a lot of the people that put up those statues were part of that lost cause narrative, that they wanted to preserve the South, that South did nothing wrong, and that kind of stuff. So the context of the statues were important too. You know, even though the statues themselves, the person that it represents maybe wasn't that, but the person that put it up was. So that's part of it too. I think putting them in historical places. I think too, most people don't even know who Jeb Stuart is and have no idea who he is, and most people don't care about historical stuff anyway. So that's maybe the biggest tragedy is these statues don't mean anything anymore, or what they were supposed to mean. I don't know. But.
Yeah. There's an African proverb that goes something along the lines of, if you don't initiate the young, they will burn the village just to feel its heat. And
yeah,
we may be dealing with a little bit of that
Sure.
right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know.
You mentioned the South just being destroyed
Yeah.
after the Civil War. Like how bad was it destroyed? Just everything was just the cities, the infrastructure, the transportation.
Yeah, everything was destroyed. Everything. So if the South wasn't touched, it would have been destroyed anyways because the whole economy is based on slavery. So it would have been destroyed anyways. The economy would be destroyed. So that was the aspect, but physically it was destroyed. So in once the federal army took control of Tennessee, and the South they took Vicksburg at the bottom of the Mississippi River, and they cut the Confederacy in two. So all the supply lines coming from like Arkansas and Texas were completely cut, and they couldn't get them to the Confederacy.
Where was that? Can you pull that up? Because when I see something on a map, it's helpful.
Sure. This is probably the most important part of the war was the siege of Vicksburg, and this is where Grant made his name for himself. It's when he took Vicksburg. It was the last fort on the Mississippi River that was still controlling that supply line to where all the train stations would come towards it and then use the Mississippi River for transport. And so that was so important. So once that was taken, the Confederacy was cut in two, and that was taken the day before or the day after Gettysburg happened, the third day of Gettysburg. So it's really interesting. Yeah, and that was devastating too, but they were probably just as important.
Well, can you go on Google Maps and just pull up where that location was?
Yeah, Vicksburg. It's the bottom of the Mississippi State, is where it would be, right before like the Delta area in that way, and that was.
And there was a fort there?
There was a big fort there, like 40,000 Confederates were there, and there was a siege of like 6 months of a siege, and it was eventually taken. And
here it is. Can you zoom out, Andrew, just see where this is? So there's Jackson.
Oh yeah, so
is that Jackson,
Mississippi? Yeah,
Mississippi.
Okay, so it's not as it's not quite.
So it's along interstate. What's that interstate there, Andrew? If you zoom in now a little bit,
20 east and west.
I-20.
I-20, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a big fort there. Still, probably like a memorial or something.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
So that was sort of the last, when that went down, that was sort of it for the Confederate side.
Yeah, so that was it for the Confederacy. They were really hurt at that point. And so when that happened, it freed up the armies of the North to go into the South. And so they were trying to destroy the Western. So there's like a Western war and an Eastern war. So like the Eastern war, like Lee's in the East fighting the Army of the Potomac, all those famous places. That's the Eastern war. There's a Western war that was fought in Tennessee and all those places with the Army of the Tennessee, which is a Southern Army, and like the Army of the Cumberland, the Army of the Tennessee, which is a Union Army, and the Army of the Ohio, which is like 3 different armies. And so they were fighting. So again, William Tecumseh Sherman, his famous march from Georgia to the sea, and he marched once he took Atlanta, and instead of pursuing John Bell Hood's army and trying to annihilate him, he just started marching east, and he found out what it means to make a modern war, where the war is about fighting the soldiers, but it's also about who's supplying the soldiers.
Right.
So all those farms and stuff like that. So he saw that, and he realized, we're going to make Georgia howl, is what he said. And he marched all the way to the sea, all the way to Charleston, and burned everything.
Just burning all
destroyed
the
it all. Yeah. And he didn't sanction killing civilians. It happened, but he didn't. That wasn't his point. He just wanted to destroy the infrastructure. So he burned Atlanta to the ground. He burned. He destroyed every town and every bridge and every train. Everything was destroyed. So, and this is a culture that if you were a woman and you were like 18 and you weren't married, you were considered a spinster. And then after the war, almost there was like 60-70% of women were unmarried or widowed. Think about that cultural shock. I mean, it's unbelievable, right?
What do you mean, a spinster?
Well, like you were seen as like weird or something because you're unmarried. The word spin. What's the definition of spinster, Andrew? That's an old word.
Okay, it's like you should be married by now, but you're not.
Like a cat lady is a modern way we'd say it.
Spinster
At
is
18.
a term referring to an unmarried woman who is older than what is perceived as the prime age range during which women usually marry.
Yeah.
At 18.
Well, yeah. I
And
don't
now
know.
after the war, you have single women everywhere of all ages.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the cultural shock that would have happened, what do those women do now? Right? Because there was places, I think Clarksville, they had like 500 or so fighters in the Confederate Army, and I think only 5 came back.
Oh, my goodness. So you have 500 men that go out, fight their battle, 5 come back.
Mm-hmm.
So 5 of these warriors are coming back to their wives and their kids.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was probably plenty of these 500 were single men too.
Yeah. But they had their sweethearts and all that.
Sure, of course, and their hopes and dreams. But then a large amount of those 500, they were married and they did have kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Man, that's so heartbreaking. Like,
That's-
how do you?
Yeah.
How do you? How do you start over? How do you rebuild?
Yeah.
All your men are gone.
They're all gone. And that was another interesting thing in the war is they learned this lesson the hard way. The army or the federal government learned this lesson the hard way is they made battalions and regiments out of the people in the town. So it's like, oh, you're the 20th Maine, you're the 101st New York, and you come from one town. You take all those people in the town and put them in the same regiment. We found out in the Civil War that was a terrible idea because you'd have one regiment and they would disappear.
Wow.
They could be in open field going through an attack onto a picket line, and they would all die. And so now you have this small town in Maine that has no more men. They're gone. And so that was change after the war. I think like in modern wars, World War I, they were mixed around. So you could join the military in Ohio, and you'd have some guy in Mississippi that was in your same like group.
Sure.
So they found that out. That's a terrible idea.
And that was part of the strategy behind how they put regiments together.
Right, because before that, they learned that the hard way. It was devastating. It would destroy a whole town.
Wow.
Like a mining town, and all the miners are dead. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
Want more guidance?
So yeah, that was crazy.
You want any more?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh yeah, it's called guidance.
It is. It's like, you want more guidance?
Yeah.
Want more wisdom?
There you go.
Liquid wisdom. So how did the South rebuild then?
Yeah. I confess I don't know enough that I wish I did about that whole history. A lot of it wasn't rebuilt. It hasn't been rebuilt in some sense, but I like the culture that came out of it is really interesting too. If I could speak on that, like the Southern Gothic was a form of like literature that came out of the time that was really, if you look that up too, Andrew, read the definition of Southern Gothic. But I think the great, like some people know, like To Kill a Mockingbird is Southern Gothic, or Oh Brother Where Art Thou was Southern Gothic. And it was kind of this idea, like it was taking this antebellum culture of like honor and external morality, and then keeping that, but then showing everyone was a hypocrite, right? In Southern Gothic stories, everyone's a hypocrite. Everyone's like secretly evil, and it was all connected in some time. It's really interesting. What's the definition?
Southern Gothic is a mode or genre prevalent in literature from the early 19th century to this day. Characteristics of Southern Gothic include the presence of irrational, horrific, and transgressive thoughts, desires, and impulses, grotesque characters, dark humor, and an overall angst-ridden sense of alienation. The first Southern Gothic writer to fully explore the genre's potential, Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. Someone just mentioned last week that How to Kill a Mockingbird is one of his favorite books to this day.
Yeah.
I haven't read it. Look at it.
I've seen the movie with Gregory Peck, which is amazing. So I haven't read it yet, and I think that was her only book that she ever wrote.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot her name, but
Harper Lee.
Harper Lee, yeah. So that's a Southern Gothic book, and that's one of the reasons why I love the South too. Is that idea? This idea of this like a hypocrisy that everyone's kind of jacked up, but has this like false sense of not showing it. That's not really working. And these kind of eccentric characters that was always attractive too, because it's so real, right? And so the Southern Gothic genre is really, really interesting. And like William Faulkner is a really big one of that. And so I read As I Lay Dying, and I think part of it was too there was a grand repentance in the South that was being preached in the pulpit about how they need to repent before God would bless this country again, because they were wrong about God blessing this country. It was not true, and so
That was a sentiment in the South?
yeah, it was a sentiment itself. It didn't take hold as full as it should have, obviously, because people, what we saw like in Jim Crow wasn't the case, but it was there after the war, and so Southern Gothic came out of that too, because like when reading like As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, it's like this sense of like condemnation, like we're all totally depraved, don't deserve forgiveness, and even if there was somebody to forgive us, they wouldn't. So with Faulkner, it's like he believed there was a God, but the God saw you and turned away, and it's so
Wow.
dark. It's so dark, but it's so emphatic. He was from rural Mississippi, like northern Mississippi, and yeah, it's crazy. It's so interesting.
So we're about 150 years from the Civil War?
170, I believe now. 165, yeah.
Okay. 165 years. And I mean, one of the things that stands out to me is if you're saying like the South was just burned down and put to rubbish.
Yeah.
And yet now some of our best cities are in the South. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like I'm just picturing like a wildfire that goes through a place and then like new life grows, you know, after, because of the devastation. Now you get that new life.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think some of the, and it's not like, you know, I mean, part of we don't have the, you know, some of the history that you do have in the Northeast.
Yeah.
But again, like when you fly into, I don't know if you've flown into like some of those airports in New York City, I mean, even Philly, but if you think of like, what's the big one in New York City?
Oh,
not LaGuardia.
Kennedy,
I'm thinking Kennedy. I mean, some of those, and I know it's a huge city, but some of those airports you go into and it's like, it feels like you're in a prison. Like the airports are so old, and like how you funnel through security lines, it's kind of dark and the ceilings seem too low, and it just seems like that infrastructure has been there too long, and it's too cold, and then you fly into an airport like Austin and it's awesome and it's vibrant, it's new and it's fresh, you know, even B&A.
Sure.
So is like some of that, it's just because this was all burnt to rubble. We rebuilt and we rebuilt better, and we have better weather down here, and people are moving here, and we have less taxes and there's less regulation, and people are coming down here, and now you have this new life. I mean, is that sort of how it happened?
Yeah, it's a great testament of the resilience of Americans, or resilience of humans in general, I think. And like we were saying, it coming full circle, people moving from California or Chicago or New York here to like southern states is wow. To know that that's happening now is unbelievable, considering the history.
What do you think are some of the cultural ramifications that we still deal with today? Not deal with in a negative sense, but that is part of the culture now that we never knew, hey, this came from the Civil War?
I think the Southern Bible Belt is an interesting thing. That actually was a big part of the Civil War. Yeah.
How so?
So just talking about the Southern Army, there was the Second Great Awakening. I don't know a lot about it, but I know it was happening in the 1860s, and then it fully came about within the time period of the war. So there's great books about chaplains in the Southern armies that wrote these big volumes about all the occurrences that happened in the wars. And there was tremendous revivals that were happening on both sides, but even more so on the Southern sides. I think it was estimated like 150,000 conversions that happened in the Southern armies.
Wow.
And so those people were coming back, and that really capstoned the South as a Bible Belt in that way, because there's amazing pictures of, like, I think during like the winter campaigns in the armies, there was like 60 chapels built in the Southern armies in the war. There was times where like the penny press was now being used, where you could print something so cheaply. So like denominations now had could printing presses. So they were printing tracts and pocket Bibles. Pocket Bibles wasn't a thing. People had big family Bibles, but no one had a personal Bible that they could put in their suit jacket. But in the Civil War, so many soldiers you can see them having pocket Bibles, like all over the war, and it was coming from denominations that were distributing them, and that's super cool because it never happened before. And the Lee's army was so prevalent because the South had generals that were like overtly Christian that wanted, like, there's stories where there's like a Mississippi regiment and they're doing a prayer meeting, and like AP Hill and Lee are going past it on a horse, and they dismount and join the prayer meeting with these infantrymen. Right. And so they were really supportive of that, even in the context of them rationalizing the evil of slavery with religion. Mm-hmm. But God's still working in this crazy context. It's so hard to navigate without offending. It's so hard to, but it was true, and it was beautiful, and people came to the Lord in amazing ways. And it was because of them knowing the fight knowing the fight that they're fighting is a losing fight. And it became really prevalent after Gettysburg, even more so. But there's beautiful stories like messengers with like tracts, gospel tracts, and Bibles being crowded out as they enter the camps of people wanting so badly to get a Bible. And
particularly with the Southern Army.
With the Southern Army, and that was true in the Northern Army too. But like people like Grant and Sherman and George Thomas, these guys weren't they weren't these Christian generals like the South was. In that sense, they were Christians, but they weren't that way because in the North they weren't. They were more industrialized. They were more secular in that way. Those ideas that we know of, modern ideas, were more prevalent in the North in that way. So the South was really supportive of that, and there's a lot of generals that like knew that was really important to the morale of the battle. So it's so cool to know that God was working in that way, and like all the amazing revivals. There was a revival in the Civil War on both sides.
What's interesting about that is when you look at the Southern Army, and you mentioned at some point they knew they were fighting a losing battle, but they were still fighting, and you have this sort of just this devastation and oppression and suffering and everything going on, and that sort of breeds this revival among these people. Well, that's what was happening in slavery too. A lot of slaves were Christians. That was their hope.
Totally.
And the message of the people of Israel, the people of God, like being brought through suffering and out of Egypt and to a better land, and like. A lot of the slaves resonated with that message, and they
saw
felt
their
like
story. Yeah,
they saw their story in that, and
beautiful.
they had hope, and they had. I mean, we have these great gospels and things, and they sang a lot too, because a lot of them didn't know how to read, but they knew how to.
Right,
you can remember a song, and they had this. Just it was a very. The Christian religion, I guess, if you want to put it in that way, was very prevalent among slaves,
totally.
And so you have this born out of suffering and hardship and devastation.
It's beautiful, and to put your gospel hat on and see the lens through how God's working. It's a beautiful thing in this terrible situation on all sides of the conflict. I mean, I love that. It's a beautiful story.
What do you think then are some of the takeaways from the Civil War that we can apply to today? Because some would say we're kind of on the brink, of I don't know if it's a civil war or if it's just greater unrest.
Yeah.
What are some of the lessons that, looking back on the Civil War, that we can apply to today?
I think one of the greatest virtues in life is compromise. And when you say that, people think of like moral compromise, where you're like compromising your ideals. But I'm not in that, and not in that sense. But in the sense that we are all tragedians, especially in a political way, where every situation is not entirely good. And I know the Civil War was fought. It was fought because they failed to compromise on both sides. That the South failed to compromise, and the North, the abolitionists, failed to compromise as well. And it made it worse. It made it a terrible thing. And so. Yeah, I think one of the greatest virtues in life is compromising in a lot of ways, and knowing that every choice you make is a tragedy. It's hard. It's so hard to try to put words to that idea, but it's what I'm saying is, I think, like with the Apostle Paul talking about the injustice in the Roman Empire and talking about like people in the early church being slaves, and knowing that like he could have made like this like violent abolitionist movement where they started killing slave masters and all that kind of stuff for a righteous cause. But he saw in light of the gospel that God was working in a different way, and that God works in this slow way, person to person, in living rooms, and that the Roman Empire was eventually destroyed, but it wasn't. And so this anti-revolutionary sense is what I'm saying of this slow kind of trust in what God's doing, and not having to take up arms to change the world so greatly and so quickly, because as we see in the 20th century with so many things that happened, like with a lot of the totalitarian regimes, it was for good things. They wanted to make the world a better place, but taking that means from God's hands to theirs created hell on earth. It was the opposite of what they thought. They were trying to create heaven on earth. They created hell on earth. And so I think it gives us a trust in God. So there's that one thing. And then the other thing was the picture, taking the hearts of the veterans that fought in the war and bringing it upon ourselves, to where, as I said, like the enemies embracing each other as brothers, hugging each other as brothers. And that being the case, that unity, man, it's so, everybody wants that though. That sounds great, but it's so much more complicated than that. But I think, I think it's a faith in this American experiment, in knowing that we're doing good things are happening, and God's working, and it's by His grace. It's not that we deserve it, but He's working. Even through the Civil War, He worked in tremendous ways. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, those are strong points, man, and I think they're super relevant for today. And it's one of the things that it's sad to see happening when we disagree on secondary and third-area issues. Now, we make such a big deal about it, and we hurt people and kill people based on like secondary and third-area opinions. I mean, that's what it is at that point. It's opinions. So it is this lack of compromise. It's my way or the highway, and it's on all sides.
Yeah.
And
that compromise comes from Christianity, where you was like, wow, like I'm a sinner. Like the evil and injustice world is actually in my heart as well.
Exactly.
Right. And so how could I be the savior of the world in that sense, when the problem of the world is actually ingrained inside of me as well in some way? And if anybody's honest with themselves, they know that. Right. So if that's true, there's this introspective aspect to it that's always been part of like the Judeo-Christian West, and that's what the product of abolition, the product of women's suffrage, all that kind of stuff, civil rights, it all came from that. It's seeing like, wow, like God's working, and we're not living up to the ideals that God has given us. And the reason why we can now is because of His grace, not his law. It's because of the grace itself.
Yeah. I didn't know that the Bible Belt was sort of born out of the Civil War.
Yeah.
That was new to me.
Yeah. I mean, it was obviously the revivals, but I mean, you think about every man had something to do with the Civil War after the Civil War in the South. And so then it became the Bible Belt. So yeah, it was a big deal part of it.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. And it's good to hear some of those individual stories like Jeb, and to see like there was guys. It's just not as black and white as good versus bad, the right side versus the wrong side.
Sure.
I mean, you have this man of character and integrity and honor on both sides of that. And that seems to be an area of concern as well. Like I've even wondered, like at what point in this country do we lose enough of that valiance and that integrity and honor and strength as a culture, where if we're really called upon to do like a World War III or something, I know at that point it's probably nuclear, right? So it's less about manpower, but still, I mean, now we're trying to look for the good men, and there aren't any, But I guess there always will be some.
Right. Yeah. If there is a civil war, it won't be someone mobilizing an army with uniforms out in the open, wanting to fight on the battlefield with honor. That's not going to happen, right?
Right.
Because that's an amazing thing that like these rebels would say, I'm going to put on an official outfit and I will fight you man to man, fair and square. right? It will be this terrible terrorism and guerrilla warfare. And
Yeah.
so that is a moral thing in and of itself that someone would want to fight the way honorable men should.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're right.
And that didn't, some of them didn't do that after the war Reconstruction. There's a lot of guerrilla forces that did all this stuff, and a lot of the big characters said, no, stop that stuff.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, thanks for talking us through that. I feel like I have a greater understanding, but more importantly, appreciation of our nation's history.
Sure.
You know? I think it's easy with things that are going on today, particularly I think with people my age or our age, where it's sort of like, you know, hey, we didn't have it all right when this country was founded, and America's the worst. There's sort of this anti-American sentiment.
Sure.
You know, but when you hear these stories and understand the history, we have a lot going for us as well. Mm-hmm. And we do stand on the shoulders of giants, and those giants made mistakes, and they didn't always have it right. Yeah. And we did make awful mistakes. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Slavery should not have been part of the founding of this country.
Yeah.
There's no question there.
Yeah. I remember there's a beautiful story. I'll end with this. Is like I was on Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga, and it's a beautiful. There's a battle there, and there's cannons up there. There's a military park, and I was walking up there alone, and there was this couple that came out, and I started talking to them. They were an Indian couple, and one lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the other lived in Los Angeles, and they were meeting in Tennessee. They were an arranged marriage, and they're both living in America. Now de facto Americans, finding out what it means to be an American, and they're at this military park of a war they have no idea what it's about. They don't have any idea why these guys fought in the real sense. And I had told them, you know what? I don't have any connection to the men that fought here. Do you know that? Like in blood. I have no connection to these men at all. And they said, "Are you serious?" Because they looked at my skin color and they thought I was a historical American, a white American. I said, no. My family came over Ellis Island. I have no connection to these men at all. And I said, but the love of this country makes me, when I go to a battlefield, I start crying, and having this sorrow and this joy and this gratitude for these men that I don't really have any connection to, but this belief and this love I have for this great nation and what it's given to me and how God has used it to bless me so much. I said, you're a part of that too. Yeah. And I said, you have just as much connection as I do to these guys. And the only thing we need to do is to fall in love with the nation, fall in love with its story, and to embrace its tragedies, its sin, its forgiveness, and its way forward. And I told him that, and they're these new Americans. I said, man, you can love these men that died for you just as I can. Yeah. And that was a beautiful thing. And
that's so beautiful and powerful.
Yeah, they really were receptive to that.
Yeah, and it's what's so beautiful about this country too. Mm-hmm. I think in one of the stats I was reading or seeing earlier is it accurate that in both California and Texas, the minority is actually the majority?
Yeah, I think
I believe
that's
I read
true,
that somewhere. Yeah. So, you know, there is so many different people here from all different walks of life and from so much different, like, diverse background and from all parts of the globe. And we can come here, and that's what makes America.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the greatest thing. I hope it never, that idea that where we're all united together in some large sense with the same heart doesn't fade away. Because even like during this, the lead up to the Civil War, there's like the Know Nothing Party. There was whole political parties that almost won the presidency that were completely built on prejudice. And it wasn't the prejudice you think I'm talking about. It was prejudice of Germans, French, and like Dutch. And it was all built on racial stereotypes of other Scotch-Irish white people saying, "Oh, look at these terrible Germans flocking in here to our farmlands." And it was all based on prejudice of other white Europeans. Mm-hmm. And they almost won. And so that's always been a part of our story, but it's a weird historical context that we never talk about. Yeah. And so, but what I'm saying is those Germans became Americans and those things. Yes. And I think that can still happen. I hope and pray that it does.
Yeah, for sure. Well, dude, cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.
This was really great. We
Awesome.
cover everything you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I think so.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me.
We will have you back on again at some point.
All right.
Most certainly.
All right, sounds good.
All right, Sam. Thanks for coming by. Appreciate it.
Yep.
That was great, man. It was helpful.